Hey everybody, Monday again, and welcome back. It's like Groundhog Day, but it's like the best Groundhog Day ever. Manny Marroquin, Part 3. An
Fuck.
excellent way to end 2021. This will be the final show of the year.
Wow.
End of Season 3, which I can just pretend it's a new season anytime I want. So it's the end of Season 3. But welcome
Well,
back, Manny.
fun. We better curse a lot and tell make up stories and all
Fuck
that
yeah.
good.
Well, make me up a story. What have you been up to in the last couple weeks?
Man, I've been good. Just same old, mixing away. Just having fun. I'm gonna take off earlier this year. But yeah, it's been fun, man. It's been reopening out here, and then new variant, and all the good stuff that 2021 brought to us.
Yeah.
More global pandemics and fucking and more records.
Yeah, well, good. I'm glad you got the records to go with it because everybody's got the pandemic, but not everybody's got records. So that's good. Well, look, man, I want to jump in because we were talking about this before we went live that we're going to touch on a few records because there's still some like major shit that we got to talk about. But then I want to jump back and get into all of the other things that you're doing because you're doing a lot of other things. Among other things, you're sitting in the studio that you own. We spent a lot of time talking about the when you got your room there and whatever, but you were booking a room. Now people are booking rooms from you, which is amazing. So we'll come back to that. But where we left off last time was we had just finished talking about 2005, when you mixed 56 records, which I still find absolutely astonishing. But 2006 was the John Mayer record, Continuum.
Gosh, that long ago. Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So 15 years ago, which is insane. But that record you were super involved in, right?
I was, yes. It was Michael Brower and myself. Yep. And that's when I met Michael, which was amazing because I feel like we have similarities in sound because I remember hearing some of his mixes and going, wow, that's how I hear things. And it just so happened that, we both ended up on the same album. And I think, listen, to me, it's such a great album, when the stars align with an artist that's trying to get away from that singer-songwriter pop image, because he is, so looking for credibility as an artist. And for Michael, I think he was coming off Coldplay maybe, and
Yeah.
I'm coming off like a lot of R&B and hip hop, and kind of doing this sort of hybrid of blues, but yet pop, but yet, I remember consciously, trying to make it sound like if the Roots was backing him up, And Steve Jordan, I mean, listen, one of the greatest drummers alive. The way he co-produced that album with John was very, very, just with a lot of booty, a lot of like big kicks and big bass and stuff. So I remember the very first song I mixed was Gravity. I don't know if I told you the story on that song.
Mm.
I'll tell you a 2 minute quick. When I first met John, we get in the studio. Steve he's in the south of France with Clapton, this other guy named Clapton. Uh, so I put the song up. It was Gravity, and I remember thinking, "Fuck." Listen. I did not know much about John Mayer as an artist besides "Your Body Is a Wonderland," and that was it. I didn't know much about him. So then, for me, coming in fresh, just a fresh perspective on an artist that I kind of knew about. I start going on the faders. I start mixing. I start, kind of getting into it. And I remember the drums being really fucking in your face. I remember that snare, like wanting to. I was mixing it like a hip hop record, right? Not knowing if that's what he wanted or not knowing anything. So at night, John comes in. First time I met him, he comes in. I play him the mix, and he's like, "Fuck, man, thank you. This is great. Call Steve. He's like, hey man, I love it. This is great. He probably obviously didn't know who I was or whatever. He's like, man, we need Manny to do more songs, right? So then the second time he hung up, goes and asked me to play it again, and he goes, man, what do you have on my vocal? I'm like, shit, I don't know. Let me let me see. And I looked at the channel and I'm like, fuck. And then I go in the tools and I'm like, man, I don't have anything on your vocal. And he was like, whoa, what do you mean you don't have anything? I actually don't have anything. Like, you don't have a reverb or a delay or harmonize? I'm like, no, it's dry. And I couldn't believe that either. It wasn't even a conscious thing. It was just more of a natural, like, this is how it felt good. And he's like, really? And this is the insecurity kicks in for as in every artist, right? And he was like, really? You don't think we need something on it? So at this point, your left brain is engaged because you should, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't think so, man. It feels great to me. I don't know if you need it, but listen, of course, we'll try whatever you want. No, leave it like that. Let me just take a CD and take it in the car, right? So fast forward, I don't know, 6 months. We finished the album. He's shooting a video for "Waiting on the World to Change," and he calls me from the video shoot. He's like, "Man, I'm playing the album in the back while I'm doing the video and in between takes, and Gravity, man. I just want to revisit that. Can you send me two versions? I want to do one with like a 480 like reverb and then AMS reverb, and let me just listen to those." I'm like, okay, cool. So I sent him two versions, one with and calls me back. He's like, "Man, I think I like the AMS reverb on it. Let's just stick with that." And I'm like, all right, cool. So he plays the album, right? He's got it done and plays it for Donnie Einer in his office, right? The president of the label at the time. So Gravity comes on and he's like, and he's telling me this story and he's pretending he's Donnie. He's like, "Hey, man, wait." And he yells out of his office, calls for his assistant. It's like, "Bring me that CD, the Gravity CD, blah, blah, blah," and puts in the CD and he goes, "That's your record. Don't fuck with it." And it was the first mix, right? And he goes, "Really? That's it's different, man. What you got is different. This is the record. Put this one out." So then he calls me. He's like, "Hey, I'm leaving Donnie's office and he wants to put Gravity the way we had it before." And I got to tell you, it makes me really uncomfortable, but I'm going to roll with it. And then you fast forward 5 years later, and he always brings us up like, "Man, listen, that's the moment I try to fight what was supposed to be and not what it was meant to be, like from your gut." And from that moment on, it was a great relationship because he started to trust, and because I didn't make that decision based on anything, but I mean, if you analyze it and break it down on why that works, is shit. Gravity, it's heavy. It's supposed to kind of hit you. The first word that comes out, gravity should be right in your face, and it should be heavy, and it should kind of round, fill the spectrum, and that snare and that kick is just so three things: snare, kick, and boom, gravity. The moment you start adding any sauce to it, then gravity goes kind of away
Yeah.
from it. So I mean, again, when you analyze it, it kind of makes sense. But at the time, for an artist to be like, "Wait a minute, this just doesn't, that's not the right way to do it." It's a constant reminder that there's no fucking rules. Whatever feels right, you just go
Yeah.
with
And I think for me, the key to that story is when he asks you what's on the voice, you were like, "Check it out. You'll never believe it, man. It's totally dry." Like you had no idea. You put the vocal up at some point and it was working. And so you didn't touch it.
exactly.
End of story. And you don't
Yep.
remember doing it. It's not
No.
about anything other than what it felt like.
And that's the I like to think that that's more my approach. As I'm as needed type of. I'm not. Hey, the kick should have this, the vocal should have that, the bass should have, would have, could have. It's like, hey, just go with a fresh perspective every time I throw faders. I always say when I throw the faders up, let's just, sometimes I don't even like to listen to the song beforehand, just because I want that emotion just to kind of take over, that sort of right brain working, your gut, and then maybe you analyze it a little better, and but it's just that I've always thought, when you kind of, whether you're in the box or not, you're making things based on emotion, right? Making changes and decisions based on emotion. Sometimes that's easier said than done, right? Because sometimes you may be having a bad day, and you got into an argument with your partner or your kids, or road rage coming in the tough streets of LA, you never know. Or you may be feeling amazing because it's a Friday and you're going to go away for the weekend. Whatever that emotion you have, internal emotion, that's going to reflect whether you like it or not on your mix. And I think the key is knowing yourself on what state of mind you're in, and how you manipulate yourself. I was gonna say how you mind fuck yourself. I don't know if you
It's
first run with it.
yeah, man.
Yeah, so that's it's all about manipulating your mindset and helping you get there. And sometimes it helps you, and sometimes it can get in the way. And when does that help you or hurt you, type of thing. And I think it's more of a psychology game that you play with yourself on every single song you
Yeah.
work on.
And you'd play it differently if you mix the same song again from scratch.
Hundred
The
percent.
first thing you do sends you down whatever road you're going to be on for that mix.
Yep. It's like, I can imagine if you're playing a basketball game. There's no two basketball games ever the same.
No. Man, think about doubleheaders in baseball.
Mm-hmm,
You
mm-hmm.
get crushed by 20 runs and come back and crush the other team by 20, and all you've done is change pitchers, and they were all pitching well that day. Like, it makes no sense.
All the different variables, right? All
Yeah.
the different pitcher to the state of mind to the sun or shade or lights, and I mean there could be whether it's 20 or 20,000 different variables that and each one may be just a tiny brick, but you stack enough of those bricks, right? And now it becomes a wall.
Yeah, it does become a wall. That is
Yeah.
what you get if you stack a bunch of bricks, or you get a pile of bricks.
A pile of bricks.
If you
Yeah.
don't
Well,
use mortar, it's just a pile of bricks.
yeah, back in the day,
Well, but that's not true either. They got the dry fit
yeah,
walls.
man.
In fact, we've got a well, and it's all dry fit stone. There's no mortar in there. So I'm talking shit, as I often do. But I think it is. It's really important, and I think like one of my favorite ways to think about it is, like, for so long in science, they thought, like, if you knew everything, you would know what was coming next. Like, the way to predict the future is if you knew everything that had happened up until that moment, because it was all based on rules. And then all the quantum physics dudes are like, nope, completely fucking random. There's some possibilities, and it could be. And that's what's happening all day, every day in any creative endeavor.
Absolutely.
And I'm not saying it's because of quantum physics, so in the comments, go easy. There is so much random stuff. Like, the phone rings, that will completely change your perspective on the next thing you're going to do on that song.
Absolutely. And that's why, sometimes I have the TV on because that kind of gets me in and out, in and out, in and out. And that's why I tend to do a lot of sports, because you don't follow a storyline, you just follow a score. So it's much easier not to pay attention to it. But whenever I feel like I need a split-second mental break, boom, I look at it. I may turn the commentator on for maybe 2 seconds, and I go right back to it. It's almost like a constant reset. So you can never stay in that bubble,
So let me ask you a question. Because you've got guys prepping your sessions and getting them laid out on a console so you can walk in and just start throwing faders, as you call it. And I know we talked about this earlier, but I don't remember how specific we got, and I didn't just rewatch parts 1 and 2. So if I'm making you repeat yourself, I'm sorry. But what I'm curious about is how far are they supposed to take it? Are they just trying to match the rough, or do they know kind of where you want to start? And like, when you're throwing up those faders, what would it be if it was just faders up?
So now it's really important for us to get the rough that everyone's approved, right? So label, manager, producer, artist, whatever that is, we get that. My guys get the session, and then they now make sure that arrangement-wise, not sonically, but arrangement-wise, that matches what we have.
Right.
Because 8 out of 10 times they send us wrong files.
Right.
And it's before where I mix it, and I spend a day on the mix, and they get it back, and they're like, "Oh, someone sent you the wrong session." I'm like, "Fuck." So now we make sure that every part matches that arrangement, and we make sure that if some idiot took ozone 9 that was heavily influencing the outcome of that rough, and they took it off, I need that back on.
Right.
You know,
So
no point.
sonically, they're trying to get at least in the ballpark.
Yeah, yeah, because I don't want it to be exactly the same either. I just want to have the tools and let me fuck with those tools, right? So if someone put an Ozone 9, I want to start from there. Sorry. I really want to start from there.
Yeah.
So that's what they sometimes they spend hours, days on getting this stuff back in, man. It's like the lost art of engineering and setting up things, you know.
Yeah.
So that's what they do. Now, once we've done that, once we have the arrangement in there, because sometimes they have to even arrange it, you know, because we just finished this Juice World album and it was like crazy because it came from everywhere, and rest in peace, he's not around. So it was a lot of politics involved as well. So when now that now that's on the desk, I mean, now that they have the arrangement and it's there, they now they put it all on the desk, and I tend to like my drums here, my vocals there, synths and effects, and now I just come in and push faders. So that's like the best part. Where before I used to have to set up my own sessions and all that. Now I just want to come in and just kind of feel it out. And I listen to the rough, obviously, because now we live in the world of roughs, which is great
Yeah.
most of the time, because now you have where to go as opposed to going with a blindfold, which is great too, but it just takes a lot longer to get there. So I see the snapshot. Oh, okay, this is what I think I'm going to improve on. This is what I'm going to leave because I think it's good, or this is what I'm going to change, right? And I kind of have that in the back of my mind, and I start mixing. Every once in a while, listen to the rough. Oh, okay, well, what's the lefts? What's leveled? Oh my gosh, they're listening to this really hyped rough, and I can't get it that loud. So then I'm not going to even listen to the lefts. I'm just going to go with gut and feel, and then we'll give them a hyped version at the end so that they're used to listen to what they're used to level wise,
Right.
but feel wise will be different. So that's really the approach.
Well,
My guys get it to where I can now push faders.
so two things about that. One, is there any way you could do a do not disturb on your computer, because your notifications are actually louder than you?
I'm getting blown up. Let me
Sorry,
turn that.
if you got to get them, you got to get them. That's totally cool. Just they're super loud.
Boom. Yeah. Here we go to to for this evening. Done. Sorry.
Ta-da! No, and so, but do you have I mean, because obviously you've got sends and you got all the buses. Are those set up with things that you use a lot? So
Yes.
you've sort of got a template built into the console, but the source
Yep.
material is set up to be the rough, right?
Exactly. I know that Send 1 is my 480, Send 2 is my AMS. I know that Bus
Right.
46, 48 are my vocal background chains. Bus 46 is my lead. I have my 1176 on 27, which is usually my lead. On 26, I got a CL1B so that I can choose which one I want to use. And then, so that's sort of like, I don't, like we talked about templates, but that's sort of the basic setup. And then, every mix
Yeah.
obviously is different. And sometimes I'm playing with a digital patch bay right now. That's amazing. And then we're kind of kicking the tires, but I won't say what it is yet because I'm still kind of, but I'm loving what I'm hearing where I can just access all my outboard gear, digitally and all that. So, but yeah, I'm still a believer and user in, analog gear,
Yeah.
maybe less and less, but I still, I always say I turn around and I'm like, man, I'm looking for something. It's not giving me what I want. And I just look and go, oh, let me try this. And all of a sudden it just magically just happened,
It is a little different than a pop-up menu. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And also I mean, obviously I'm a huge advocate of mixing fully digitally because it's all I do.
Yeah.
But like
Yeah.
the thing the analog gear has is that chaos. It has that quantum stuff. It's different every day. Every unit is different, and
Yep.
that can be a good thing.
And it depends on the humidity and the temperature of the room too. So
Yeah.
for that constant change, it's kind of exciting, because you kind of never know what you're going to get. And again, talk about the emotion, right? There's a different emotion that comes. It may not be, again, good or bad, but it is a difference of emotion. So now you're again, going back to getting in and out of that sort of zone, now you're kind of out of it, and then you're back in with this slightly different tone, right? And you play, and then you can run with that. And it may work, it may not work, but at least you're aware. Now there's that push pull, that interaction you have with the song. Whereas, sometimes I find myself just staring at a screen, and I'm not doing it based on emotion, but based on visual waveforms or GUIs or whatever it is. So
Right.
I try very, very hard not to do that. That's why, you can see the size of my monitor.
Yeah.
Like time, it's time. People come in like, how can you work on this?
It's because
Well,
I'm not working on that. I'm working on this. Yeah.
exactly. No, that's it. And I had, listen, I had a giant fucking monitor on the side, and I felt like I was mixing with one ear because I was always staring at
Right.
it.
Right.
Because I didn't have it in front of me, I had it to the side. And at one point, I was like, man, I'm spending too much time looking at things and not hearing and feeling them. And that's the pros and cons of everything, right? Digital is great because you can boom, boom, recalls and all that, unlimited options, right? That's amazing. But also, we tend to do things from the left brain now, and more technical things than more emotion. It's almost like when you close your eyes and you EQ, fuck, I still do that. I still love doing that. And the moment it hits you, that's where you stop.
Yeah.
Whatever frequency that is, doesn't even matter. Where you have, an EQ in front of you, a plug-in, you're seeing what you're doing. You have to.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, that's still, people just have to also get over themselves. Like they worry about, oh, am I allowed to boost plus 12?
Yeah, of
Like, well,
course.
yeah, because maybe it's like 18 dB too quiet. Of course you are.
Exactly.
Boost whatever you need to boost.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. It's,
But you lose in that process. You got to be super, super disciplined to ignore some of those things, because we grew up with analog where it doesn't matter. Maybe more is better just because it's nice distortion. It's not
yeah.
nasty like over, saturation. Or nowadays there's some nasty things that happen in these plugins that you can't really. So naturally, people are not pushing it as hard as they probably could.
Yeah,
Because of,
but I think, to me, oh, sorry, cat coming and going. I think one of the most important things, though, is what we touched on earlier about not remembering what was going on with John's voice. However you're mixing, as long as you can get into a state where you don't remember everything you've done, then that means you've been creative and you've been listening.
yeah. And sometimes, yeah, that's why having these conversations are really interesting because like we said before, it just takes me back and I'm trying to think of what I would have done because it's not even conscious. It's
Yeah,
almost like, okay, what's going to get me there? Okay, these plugins can help me get there. This piece of gear, this, stereo bus, or you just hear certain things and you're constantly trying to reach that. And these are just tools to help you reach whatever you have that you need to get out almost, whether it's because you listen to the rough and you're trying to either mimic that or be influenced by that or inspired or doing the complete opposite. So those are the things that are going through your head. I remember, listen, and I'm sure you've been through it where you mix for 12 hours straight and you feel like you fucking ran a marathon, right? Because
yeah,
because you're mentally always on, like, and you're not only on, but you're like sprinting, like
yeah,
it's exhausting, mental, and that's something that we don't really talk about enough, like the mental agitation, I guess is the word, or whatever we want. It can be draining, and some we all kind of keep going and knowing that we're mentally tired and we're gonna make bad decisions now.
yeah. But I mean, I've tried, like every once in a while, I'll try to sort of narrate in my head what it is I'm doing. Like most of the time, it's just you're in it, you're doing it, you're not really thinking about it. But sort of as an exercise, and it's impossible. Like the language can't keep up with how fast you're switching your focus and moving around and doing things. And it is a gigantic juggling act. And I think that is, for younger mixers, it's one of the most important things, is to get to that stage, to get off the kind of checklist of like, all right, now I better go check my high pass filters on stuff. Because now you're just thinking about high pass filters. You're not thinking about the bass or the acoustic guitar and, you know, how it fits into the world. And it's also, I think sometimes people feel, I definitely have seen comments where it's like, man, you shouldn't have a template. You got it every mix from scratch. It's like the mental energy it would take you to rebuild everything from scratch on every mix, you'd never get a mix done.
Yeah. You know, I think it's also important to define templates, you know, because templates could be, for me, a template, you know, could be, okay, a drum bus, a bass bus, a vocal bus, right? Like stuff that, and you put all the same plugins, right? That could be a template for, you know, to me, I'm sort of against that. But a template for me is, like we said, I have AMS on send 2, radio on send 1, and maybe I have my, you know, my plugin as a send return with a dedicated, you know, bus going into it type of thing. To me, those are setups, but not templates. So I think it's important to define that, because one time I said, hey, don't use templates, and they're, you know, I think, I forget what it was, and everyone went like, whoa, what do you mean? No templates, what are you talking about? And I'm like, hang on. Let's define what that means. That's my definition of a template. It's like, if you're running it through your background chain and you have the same plugins on that, then that, to me, you may not want to do that, because, you know, not two background tracks are exactly the same. So you may want to play with different colors, different plugins. Yeah, you have your go-tos and maybe have them inactive or something, but try different things to kind of get you out of your comfort zone. So I always believe that once you get comfortable, once you come in and start doing shit just as like a robot, then you got to change things. You almost got to be uncomfortable, and you got to get used to being uncomfortable, because that's when you're going to challenge yourself to, here we go, I'm going to use the same kick and snare bus, and I have the 2044 on the kick and the 1073 on the kick for every fucking mix. Well, then it becomes very monotonous, and that's when you start losing, you know, why am I using the same two things on the kick for every kick? If I can honestly say that out of all the songs I mix, I've maybe 98% of them are new sounds, different sounds. They're very seldom will it be the same sound, the recycled sound. So therefore, why am I using the same thing? You know, so I think that's, to me, that's the definition, or just how I separate a template and not, you know.
And I think from most of the templates I've seen from people who are doing this, you know, for a living and are doing decently well at it, the better the mixer, the more of their template is parallel and may not even get used. Like, I mean, I don't know. I've probably got 3 or 4 plugins that are actually like, hey, audio will go through these definitely on their way to the mix bus. And it's like it's a de-esser. You know, but there's tons and tons of parallel stuff. And some of those chains are really simple. Some of them are super complicated, and I'd never want to build them again because I don't remember what the hell I did. But I named it something, and it's on a send. And if I want it, I got it. And that's...
And I think that's the difference. You know, like you have your sort of arsenal of things that you may want to use if they're there, and you have them on the side. That to me, I don't know if I would call that a template though. Maybe you would. I don't know. To me, that's part of your setup, you know. But to me, templates, for whatever reason, right or wrong, I think of a template as something that's repetitive, that you're going to use over and over again, even though it's the different song. So to me, I was always discouraged that, and like, don't use the same, you know, stereo compressor on your synths, or don't use that fucking EQ on your bass all the time. It's, to me, then what happens is you do that long enough, it becomes a job. You just show up to do a job, and then you sound just not inspired.
Right. And it doesn't allow each song to do its own thing as much.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm glad we cleared that shit up.
Guys, templates, fuck.
Yeah. Well, calling them sets, I mean, and I think you're right, because the word template implies that it will be the same. Like, you're always basing on the same thing, but it's just a collection of tools.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
all it is. And it's a collection of things that are time saving enough that you can stay creative instead of like, oh, right, I got to go build that reverb again,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
has,
Yeah.
a filter before it and a de-esser, and it's got a pre-delay and a different plugin, and then it's got some distortion after. Like,
Yeah.
like the stuff you built into your signature
Mhm.
plugins, you
Yeah.
did it so that you wouldn't have to build that chain from scratch every time. That's
Yeah.
fine. And
That's part of your setup, I
yeah,
guess, right?
yeah,
That's a setup that you may want to use at a later time, or whenever that inspiration, that delay, that cool delay that you want to throw, or um, as opposed to you know I'm gonna do this on every kick, snare, bass, vocal,
right.
background.
All right, so back to some records here. So we talked about the John Mayer record, and it was interesting you mentioned that you felt as though you'd been doing a lot of hip hop and R&B leading up to it. And were you consciously looking to get more varied genre-wise at
Yeah,
that point?
100%. I always thought back in the day. Look, we're all music fans. I listen to from freaking, from Tool to freaking Kanye
Yeah, I
to
mean your list it's all over the place in a
so I'm
really good way.
I'm a music fan, and I was always bummed to, back then when I was starting out, if you wanted a rock mix or alternative rock, whatever that was at the time, you went to CLA, right? That's what it was. And if you wanted this type of record, you went to that guy. And I never understood that. I never liked that. I'm like, fuck, man, we're too, we're music heads. Why would you? It's almost like having a musician, like a jazz musician, can probably play three chords and be a pop musician as well. So why are you boxing us in? So you consciously, I've always wanted to do different genres, just because, again, just because I'm a music fan, and I started doing this as a fan, and got really, really lucky that people actually started paying me to do this. I'm like, hell yeah. And so I was always trying to challenge myself into doing things that people had, they had a perception of that I couldn't work on stuff. Like I'll never forget when I got a call. Hey man, have you ever mixed like live drums? I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, well, even if I didn't, does it matter? I mean, like, to me, it was so natural to mix stuff, whether it's program or live. Or you ever mix a string section before, a live string section? I'm like, oh my gosh. So I always wanted to do, I wanted to be a genre-less mixer, and this is, one time about 20 years ago, 22 years, 25, when man, there were very defined genres at the time. Nowadays, I feel like it's finally genreless. You can mix a country album and then go and do a Metallica album, and that's the beauty of being in these days, where we can do different genres. So for me, it was always like, I want to do different things. I've always been conscious, and I told my manager at the, like, even if I mix for free, I wanted to, like, that's what kept me going, as a fan. And I think that's when you have longevity in any career, you have to really kind of get out of your comfort zone.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah. Well, it worked for you a little bit. So, I mean, all right. Let's take a little detour to 2010 and just talk about Bruno Mars, because I believe that's the first time
Hmm.
you're with Bruno. But you're again pretty involved, right?
Yep.
So let's hear
Wow.
that
Yeah.
story.
Yeah. Bruno was, man. He was just a songwriter at the time. I went to see him at Molly Malone's on Fairfax. There must have been 10 people there, man. It was, and when I saw him live, I was like, gosh, this guy's one of the most talented individuals have ever seen. I remember saying this, and there were 10 people out there, man. And between sets, they were outside smoking a cigarette. I'm like, I go, Bruno, that was one of the best shows I've ever seen. Oh man, thank you, man. I don't know, man. I don't know. People just don't get it, and blah blah blah. He was on sign at the
And
time.
how did you know about him to go see the show?
Well, because so funny enough, the label had called me to help produce a Brandy song, and they're like, hey, there's this guy named, these producers, they're super young, and we want someone a little more experienced to kind of guide them through this production because we're not 100% happy with it. And then we took the meeting, and it was Bruno and Phil, and they were wanting me to kind of produce stuff with them, and I'm like, fuck, this stuff is fine. And at the time, it was that song Billionaire, was with Travi, and he had done what was the beautiful girls all over the. What's his name? The artist. Fuck, I'm spacing on his name, and people are gonna be like, "Duh," but B.O.B. Sorry. So I had worked on that song, and that's how, and he was the featured artist. But before that, that's how I met him, through the label, them asking me to produce with them. And I'd never, not that I don't have the desire to produce, but I just always wanted to mix. So I mixed their song for Brandy, and it got placed. It was one of their first placements and all, and we just became friends. But I remember them playing records and thinking, "Fuck, this stuff is so good." And then he's like, "Oh yeah, we got, I'm an artist too," and I was like, "Okay," and that's how I ended up being friends with him and Phil, and would see him play local gigs. And then I'll never forget, at the parking lot here at Larrabee, he's like, "Hey man," and this was maybe a couple weeks after the Molly Malone show, because I was like, "Man, hang in there," that talk, like, "Hang in there, bro. It's gonna happen. Just hang in there." And we were in the parking lot, and he goes, "Manny, Atlantic is gonna make me an offer, bro." I'm like, "Oh shit, there you go, congrats." And hey, the rest is history, and I worked on the first couple of albums with them. The first album was a collection of just songs that they had written in the last few years. And then the second one, that was unorthodox. That album was just now him becoming an artist, and that was fun because if you listen to that album again, it was a lot of different subgenres in one. And I'll never forget, someone from Kiss FM, I believe, came over and listened to it, and she just didn't get it. She's like, "Man, it's all over the place." And we're like, "Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what we want." And at the time, people were not getting it. But listen, he's one of the most talented artists I've ever been in the studio with, and he's very, he knows exactly what he wants. And at the time, he at least let me experiment with things like Locked Out of Heaven. I remember doing things that, not consciously, but just trying to get to that, like we were saying earlier, like, how do we get to that thing that we're hearing? And I just wasn't able to achieve it. And I remember putting a multi-band, and I was automating a multi-band in the mix, which is, I've never done that before. I still don't do it, like, hardly ever. It can fuck you up. But it was one of those where it just felt natural, and that song, in particular, I hear it as a three-part song, and but how do you make three songs into one and feel like it's the same? And the kick changes, and it goes four on the floor. His hooks kind of are down hooks, instead of uplifting hooks. So all the challenges of how do you keep the listener kind of engaged, or up to this point, hooks were like up. It was like the biggest part of the song. I remember Bruno was the opposite. It was down hooks, which is really interesting if you break it down and analyze how that works and why that works. Locked Out of Heaven was that perfect example of music going to pop music going towards that direction of down hooks, and for me that was honestly just a fresh perspective on a pop song. So trying to get it to still be exciting, and kind of the highs and lows of, I always say, the mind fucking, that goes on in the song to keep listeners engaged. Uh, we tried a few things that were not really what we were used to doing, and so it was a fun time because there was a lot of experimentation happening with both analog and digital, and even mastering too, and how that album wasn't really mastered, because Bruno never liked mastering when it came back, so we just leveled it out. I knew that song number 3 was 1.2 down. Song number 4, we brought it up 0.2 or 1.5, and it was left unmastered.
Right.
And then when you bring that, if you play that album, you can turn that album. I mean, you can go up. You can turn it up really loud, and it won't hurt your ears. And that was the point. That was definitely on purpose. And so it was like the pop version of him without sounding pop, I guess.
Right.
I mean, beautiful girls, kind of getting away from that, and doing, I want to fuck you like a gorilla. That's a lyric. Yeah, he was graduating from being the pop star that he was.
Right. Right. And really writing for himself as well.
What's that?
Writing for himself as opposed to possibly writing for other people.
Exactly, exactly. And that was many conversations on, look, my first album was, they were, yeah, like you said, they were meant for other artists, not necessarily for him. And yeah, that was fun, man. That was a lot of fun moments with both Phil and Bruno.
I love the just the little thing about people like, oh, I don't know, this album's all over the place. Like, have they not heard, like, two of the most successful artists in the history of pop records are the Beatles and Bowie? All those records are all over the fucking place.
Man, I mean, even as an artist, when they go to Revolver, I mean, can you imagine what
But
that
just,
was like?
but what about just within Revolver? You
Yeah,
know, Eleanor Rigby and Tomorrow Never Knows in with Taxman. Like,
yeah.
you kidding?
3 completely different albums, almost.
And they're also the answer to the argument of, like, how do you tie a record together? Like, well, you don't. You don't need to. And some people say, well, the singer will tie it together. Well, they had 4 lead singers. It's just make the record. It's going to work.
Make the record, and hopefully you have good artistry that comes with it.
Exactly.
It doesn't work for everyone, but some of these iconic artists make it work.
Yeah. So let me ask you a little tiny question about the Locked Out of Heaven mix. You're saying you automated the multiband between these 3 sections of the song. You'd never done that before. I'm curious what brought you to the moment of thinking to even try that. Was it just like this tiny little blip, oh, let me try doing that, or was it like a sort of a big idea?
No, it was kind of like automating things within the mix, but it wasn't working. It was kind of working, but it wasn't like. And then at one point, I forget when that moment was, where, like, I'm like, well, if we were to be mastering this, how would we do it? And we were very conscious of the 3 sections, right? And I was like, how do you glue them, but at the same time have personality without you knowing it as a listener? Like, maybe people, when they go back and listen to it, they'll realize, oh shit, it is 3 different sort of songs. Wow. And then just trying things on the desk, in the box, and not being successful with the feel of it, right? And then I was like, fuck it, let me just try automating, because this section I wanted to hit hard, but it's too harsh or too pointy or not enough point or too bassy or whatever that was. And I kept doing it with the actual sounds themselves, and it just felt okay, but it wasn't like it wasn't capturing that emotion. So I popped a couple things on the stereo bus, and I'm like, oh shit, this actually works. But the plugin that I was doing it with, I had to punch in, because the automation has the delay,
Right.
So it was challenging, because sometimes I would hear the bypass, sometimes I wouldn't. So it was, imagine printing. We had, like, even just the final mix was like 20, not 20, but a dozen different takes so that it wouldn't click, and then punching in and 10 times until it wouldn't click. And anyways, but I think creatively it was just searching for something that I tried to do in different ways that didn't really work. So it's almost like trying everything until it works. And
Yeah.
and this just happened to work.
It's interesting. I'm only asking because I just did a mix for somebody a few days ago where, like, it was all good, but it just wasn't working, and it wasn't working. I couldn't figure out why. And then all of a sudden, I just sort of out of nowhere, like, I'm going to take all the top end off this mix.
Mm.
And it's like, oh, shit, that's awesome. But then the middle of the song's not good. So I'm actually automating a low pass
Yeah.
throughout the entire song. And I've never done that before. I'm sure I'll never do it again. And I wish I knew how I thought of it, because I'm like, I'm going to get in a box on something. I want to know where I went to find it. But it just sort of fully formed, finally went boink, do that. And
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the beauty about why we keep doing what we're doing, because you find that moment of like, man, I thought, just when you've been making records for a long time, we both have, and to still have that sort of spark of thinking, like there's no rules. I think that's really, really important to continue to do. There are no rules.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. All right. So the John Mayer thing worked because you became quite eclectic. Not that you weren't already, but I just want to give a little list of some stuff you mixed in 2012, shall we? Or came out in 2012. Here's the incredibly partial list of what you mixed that came out that year. Lana Del Rey, Rolling Stones, Imagine Dragons, Colby Calais, Linkin Park, Taylor Swift, Fun, and DJ Khaled. So, like, what the fuck, man?
Yeah, man.
That's one of each.
Oh man,
that's a good list.
Up is tired.
So let's talk about the Stones. Let's talk about that, because that's,
Yeah.
No matter how eclectic you want to be, that seems unexpected, even though it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, that was that was the 50th anniversary, and I don't know if you guys know much about the Stones, how Keith and Mick don't really get along in the studio. So they wanted to, for their 50th anniversary, they wanted to release one song each, and thankfully I got the call. One from Keith was Jeff Basker. We had done Kanye and Alicia Keys and all that with, and then on the other side was Don Was, and I had worked with Don as well. I think we had done maybe John Mayer at the time. I forget, but anyways. It was amazing because there were two completely different vibes. The two songs. One was very progressive and current. The Mick one, because you got Jeff Basker, and we had done like 808s and Heartbreak with Kanye and a bunch of other things. So it was very progressive, and the other one was straight up fucking rock and roll. But the goal was to make it, just be the Stones of whatever that year was, 2010. I forget the year. But anyways, so I think that's probably why I got the call, just to make it sound maybe different than what, say, some of the other guys would have done. So my approach with that was just like, again, going back to John Mayer, how my perception of me hearing the Stones today, like what would I like to hear if the Stones were doing the record today? Like, how would I like to hear John Mayer with the Roots, with the Mick songs? Like, what if Kanye was producing it with Jeff Basker? How would what would that be like? And being mindful of what makes Kanye for 808s and Heartbreak. You take like the top, 5, 10, 30 things that come to mind, and you kind of have those in the back of your head as you're working on it. So, and then how would I like, Keith to sound like, he's fucking 28 again, and give it a certain sound, but still not changing, not like reinventing it, but just enough things that, those are the Stones. But then when you really, really analyze it, you're like, wow, there's a lot of this, or a lot of that, or not enough of this. So the goal is to make it just effortless, maybe sound effortless, but giving it, I always say, the Tabasco, so that it becomes different enough to them, so that they feel like they're progressing, they're evolving.
Right. Fun, man. And I mean, and Mick has always done that.
Always.
He made a disco record.
Yep.
Maybe questionable, but
but as an artist, you gotta try it. That's why. Listen, that's why like Madonna's always been amazing at that, because she keeps reinventing herself and keeps her, keeps everything exciting. Sometimes it may not work, but you kind of have gotta have that mentality.
Yeah, but not just copying. It's they're excited about what they're doing. I mean, and Bowie made a drum and bass record, and it
Yeah.
wasn't so great, but he
Yeah.
made one.
Listen, Kanye is a perfect example of someone that is constantly evolving. It doesn't always work, but that's what makes him Kanye. So there's a lot of artists that are willing to sound wrong. They were willing to take that risk,
Right.
and that's as an artist, that's a big risk. That's why a lot of artists can't do it.
Yeah. All right. I want to, because we got to get to all the other stuff you're doing, and we're already almost an hour in. But there's still, man, there's so much stuff. But let's just pick a couple like little weirder ones, like Leon Bridges.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So Leon Bridges, for people who don't know him, up until that point, like he did a record live to 8-track, no overdubs, everything's bleeding like fucking crazy, like super old school. That dude is a 90-year-old in a 20-year-old's body.
Yep.
So how did that come about? Because it makes perfect sense to me, but it's not an obvious choice.
For that one is I gotta thank Ricky Reed, Wallpaper. He produced the album and thought it was, I would, be a good fit. And now Ricky is an amazing producer. If you don't know who he is, he's a sonic producer. So the stuff that I got, by the time it got to me, it was just like feeling so good. And for me, it was that type of project was like what to do not to fuck it up,
Right.
So just running it, making the low end, make sure that, again, going back to what you said, being that analog guy, but yet contemporary, so that it would coexist with some of the other contemporary artists out there. So it was that album was kind of getting him away from that, but still keeping that, keeping some of the integrity of being an analog, like the 90-year-old dude trapped in, it was just one of those things. Again, man, going back to what's your perception of someone like that, and today and you take that information in your head and you kind of store it in that hard drive of yours, and you use it whenever is necessary. Because even within the album, each song could have a completely different feel, and within the album, each song needs to be treated almost different. So, but your kind of sound it's got to be a cohesive album as well, right? A collection of songs. And one thing that I've never done, and I know some, peers do this, where they'll listen to other things, or they'll listen, they're doing an album, they'll put a couple of the songs within the album in there so you can reference those, so that you kind of are in the same universe. And I've never done that. I've always gone with just a natural instinct. And again, some roughs are really good, and you don't want to fuck them up. And others, you kind of roll up the sleeves and do stuff that you would do to make it what it's supposed to be, right? And then you get lucky, and hopefully all the songs kind of, work together. And I think that's kind of I never wanted to sound the same either, like an album to sound the same. Like we're talking, maybe one has a little more top end, or more booty, or more mids, or not enough. Maybe that's what makes albums kind of, like just interesting. When you listen to it from beginning to end, it's like it doesn't sound like one continuous song, And that's probably why I don't do that. Just to give it enough. I trust myself that I hear things a certain way, that I trust myself that hopefully it'll be in the same,
well, I think we do. I mean, because we always mix stuff the way we hear it, no matter what. I mean, obviously, we're always following the artist's vision, et cetera, but it's always through the filter of our lens. Yeah. And I think that, like, for me, references just confuse the hell out of me, because you go in thinking like, okay, let me check out the bass. But like the difference between the bass level and the vocal level is so crazy compared to what you're working on that all you can think is, oh wow, the vocal's way too quiet. Like, and you didn't even listen to the bass.
Exactly.
So yeah, I'm not a reference person either. I can't do it.
Then you become an insecure mixer, and we can spot those fucking a mile away. Yeah.
Two thumbs. This guy.
This guy. I think we all are. Come on.
Yeah, to a point. Yeah. Anyway, we don't have to go down that rabbit hole of my dark soul. Um, but yeah, I think it's if you can keep your perspective, then you don't really. All that can happen from a reference is it'll make you think you should do something instead of what you want to do.
Maybe, and again, going back to left brain, right brain, you'll do it because you're hearing it a certain way as opposed to feeling it a certain way, which is what you should
Yeah.
be doing.
Whereas I think that for me anyway, referencing the rough a lot is actually really, really helpful. But I'm not listening for it's like how does the snare feel? How does it transition into the
Right.
chorus feel? Like I feel like this should be a goosebumps moment. Was it? Or have neither of us gotten there yet? And it's always like really great when you go back to the rough and like, okay, cool, they didn't do it either. But there's
Yep.
nothing more depressing than like, yep, this sounds a million times better and
Mhm.
feels terrible.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Agreed.
It does happen. It does happen. So, look, I'm going to skip over another 450,000 records that I want to talk about, but I feel like we have to talk about the other side of you, which is the side of you that now owns studios and restaurants and like you're doing it. So, I talked to Dave Way about when he bought Andorra, which, was another part of Larrabee. So,
Yep.
everybody who's cool seems to buy parts of Larrabee. That's the thing, man.
That's
So
right.
let's talk about that because you talked at length about how you wanted a room and you kind of tricked your way into the room you wanted and all of that. But like that was the goal, to have your own room somewhere. But basically you would have been parked there. Someone else is paying for the room
Yeah.
by booking it and that. But that's a long way off from owning the facility. So
Yeah, Kevin Mills came up to me one day a while back and said one of the owners, the previous owner, and which he's still involved, but he's like, man, Napster's about to go down. This ship is sinking. I'm out. Yeah, I'm thinking of selling the studio. I'm like, and he goes, would you want to buy it? And this is just and I'm like, no. I'm like, that sounds like the worst thing, like sounds like the worst idea ever. No, I don't want to buy the studio. Are you kidding? I'm not a studio owner. I'm a studio rat. So he goes, well, if I sell it, this is how I wasn't even thinking. He goes, if I sell it, somebody, whoever buys it, can kick you out. You know that, right? Because I don't have a lease agreement or any of that. I'm like, oh shit, you're right. It's not like being in an apartment and you sell the building and you stay. No, you're right. People can. I'm like, oh, I gotta. Again, I spent so much time and effort getting into Larrabee. Now, if he sells it to anybody, there's a possibility of them kicking me out of my own room. I'm like, that can't happen. So I'm like, I go to my business manager. I'm like, hey man, I'm thinking of doing this because that the last thing I want. I mean, I moved closer to the studio. My whole life is around the studio here. And he's like, Manny, that's the worst idea. You can don't do it. The ship is sinking. Don't get out now. I'm like, and I went and I did everyone tried to talk me out of it, and I did exactly I did the opposite. I ended
and
up.
what year are we in approximately here?
Oh gosh. You know, ownership took a few years because listen, I didn't have the capital at the time, and it just Kevin, bless his heart, man, I love that guy to death, and he made it easier for me to over time acquire equity as I quote performed, and that was the best thing that happened because it wasn't like it didn't go from like here's a sale like you're buying a house like from you close escrow and it becomes yours. So it took years for that to happen, but he made it easy for me to kind of transition. I had been a loyal client for years. I've been in my room in Studio 2 at Larrabee. I've been there. I mean, I've been, yeah, it's been, oh gosh, maybe 22, 23 years. So I'd been a loyal client, and he thought, when Napster hit, I remember being the only guy here for months at a time. So studio business, by the way,
Right.
is not a good business. I don't recommend going into the studio business because you'll park your money in fucking crypto or the market, and you'll do way better than the studio. But it's a labor of love. So for me, it was a labor of love. I wanted to have, you know, my place. I didn't want to have someone kick me out of my place. You know, that to me was. So I didn't do it based. I didn't look at the numbers and say, oh, this could be a good business. I just the fear. It was just based out of fear of losing a room that I've done. You know, all those records you mentioned. You know, that's like to me that's my sonic tempo. I couldn't risk that. So you know, long story short, you know, I started gaining that equity, and I had been very involved in the operation just because this is my home. So I had been like, you know, my goal was to always have a art studio. You know, I never wanted a plaque on the wall, and I told Kevin like to take plaques down and do this and do that. So I kind of was doing more of the operation already, and little by little, it just became what it was. And when I took over, we had 3 rooms, and now we're up to 6 or 7. Yeah, including a mastering room, a production room, and I know we'll talk about the Schneeb room and stuff like that. But it wasn't the initial idea wasn't to be, you know, to make a business out of it. It was just based out of fear.
Right. Well, because we talked about this years ago when I was looking for what to do with my gear and things, and just talking about the fact, like for me, I've always had this like DIY, it's in my garage thing, and like somehow I make that work. And you're like, man, you can't do that. You need a place where people can show up and be like, fuck yeah.
Yeah.
And it's really important for your clients to be able to do that. And so some people might think like, oh God, he's scared of the, you know, losing the room. And obviously you're comfortable in the room, but you could mix in the back of a bus and you'd be fine.
I should try that.
You should try that, actually. Not even an Airstream, just like some city bus. You could do it. You could do it on headphones with a 4-track, and it would still be better than what most people were doing. But the point was, it wasn't just the console or the gear. It was everything about it.
Yeah. You know, I always, fuck, man, it's, you know, I never wanted someone at my home. I'm such a private person. I could listen financially. I would be way better off. Maybe that house in the Bahamas I would be way sooner than. So financially, I'd probably be way better off doing it, you know, in my home, really, and or somewhere, you know. But that to me is like to me was never the choice or the an option for me. It's always been about. I know this may sound weird or silly, but to me, I was a purist for the art form and not necessarily for financial, you know, which, look, it's a very naive way of looking at things, but for me, it kind of worked, you know, it kind of worked. I never thought, oh man, I'm going to pay X amount where I could be getting it for me instead of giving it to Larrabee. And my mom she's always said, mijo, always anything you do, don't do it for the. Of course, we need the money. We all need it, but that can't be the reason why you do certain things. And I always had that in my mind. Like, look, if you work hard at something and you put your heart and soul into it, hopefully good things will happen, and they will happen with time. And you just gotta have patience, right? But you gotta work hard and you gotta be smart about it. You can't just like not work hard and expect things, which is a lot of us tend to do that too. But for me, it wasn't even about a business as much as like, look, I want to create the best possible scenario for me to be able to perform for my clients. Because look, I still take it seriously. I think it's the biggest compliment that someone is willing to pay you money to work on their baby. I mean, that still to me blows my mind to this day, you know. And I'm very humbled by that, and I want to continue that, and I want to continue to give the best possible service. So if I was, you know, for me is like if you want to come and we have an espresso machine and you can have that experience, then great. You know, that's part of it. It's like an experience, and I want to be able to come in and have the tools that I need, that I think I need to hopefully perform at its best. You know, and I think I owe it to the people that are paying me to do that. You know.
Yeah.
So that was the idea, you know. That was the simple idea of like, okay, let's do it. Let's see. Again, I didn't want to acquire a studio. That's, you know, that wasn't on the agenda. But it's worked out. You know, knock on wood, it's worked out.
Yeah.
So.
Well, look, I think that it's also it's the bigger picture view of what Kevin was seeing. He's seen the music business is going to implode. like they've been printing money for years and years and years, that's going to stop.
Mhm.
He's absolutely right about that. But if you think it all the way through, what you realize is supply will meet demand in the recording studio game, and there will still be a much smaller number, but there will still be high-end studios because there will always be high-end studios, and you're perfectly positioned.
Yeah. You know, before these studios were owned by individuals that were not in the business. They were just businessmen, right? Because remember back in record plan back in the mid 90s was like 3,500 a day for a room for a 12-hour lockout. The moment that 13th hour, it was like 500 and extra an hour for
Yeah,
overtime.
yep, and you're paying for your waters after the first day, and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I saw the bill. I'm like, you're charging me for water, okay? But hey, listen, labels didn't mind paying that, and it
Yeah.
was a legitimate business for studios. And then, of course, Napster, and that changed the whole business model. So now I think studios are owned by users, because if there was a businessman trying to buy this, you don't make the profit margins aren't there for you to, it's high, low profit margins and a lot of room for error. It's not a business model that a smart businessman would go into. It just wouldn't. It's a passion project. It is a passion because everything that comes in goes right back out to the business.
Yeah. But it's working out.
Yeah, no. Listen, it's working out great. It's great because now I have my two rooms, and I can, I can, if I need a third room to throw this here because I'm doing Atmos or this, I mean, it gives me the flexibility to really, really, again, not cut corners and hopefully perform, the way I think I could or should.
Right. And I also love that you're employing a bunch of people. There are
Yeah,
people coming up and learning, and I mean I'm doing this instead. But like I haven't had an assistant now in 10 years, and
right,
and
right.
it's brilliant. You're one of the few people left who's got that traditional studio thing going on where people can learn how to make records.
Dinosaur, yeah.
But you're an important dinosaur. That's the thing. You're not some
It
plant-eating
doesn't
piece
work
of
anymore.
shit hiding
Yeah.
out in the bushes. I don't think you're Velociraptor either. I'll think of the proper dinosaur. It's like, what's your dinosaur name? All right. Yeah, just can't reach the faders.
Yeah,
Um,
I do it again, going back to the passion, man. I just do it based on passion, and hopefully good things come out of it. Um, with Larrabee, it's friends and family here. We are very picky on who works here. I'd rather this place be completely empty, than have book sessions with people that don't respect what I call as sonic temples. So we
right.
don't mind saying no to people. And thankfully we're in a position to be able to do that.
Well, Sonic Temples is the perfect transition to talking about the little room next door that you
Yeah, yeah,
picked up.
yeah. Which, yeah, the little room, which I think is probably one of the best, if rooms in the world that
Yep.
people never heard of. Schnee, Bill, what an amazing guy. Built an incredible, incredible room, and I took over that room a few years ago. After many conversations with Bill, we became really good friends, and he, it was one of the best decisions I made because man, I don't know what would have happened if somebody else would have bought it. They probably either turned it into a freaking apartment building or who knows, a garage.
Yeah.
But man, the history in that room, oh my gosh, I can't, begin to even name drop all the records that he did in there, classic records. And Bill just said, "Hey, man, I think it's going to be in good hands," and I take that responsibility very seriously. I'm like, no, it is going to be in the best hands because I'm going to take care of it. I'm going to hopefully keep that legacy alive, and now that for the first time ever, and since 1981, the place is it's available to book, and I mean, that to me is amazing because I imagine Abbey Road being a private studio for 30 plus years, And that's exactly what this is. If this was a if it was a commercial room, I think it would be named, with the likes of Abbey Road and East West and Capitol, and it's that good. And I
I
just cracked drums the other day, and I haven't done it in a while, and I'm like, I just couldn't believe it, man. I had the whole mic kit, and I used like two mics, and it sounded fucking, I mean, better than anything, any place I've cut drums in.
There are two studios where I remember getting stuff to work on, not even mixing, it's probably just doing overdubs or something, and where you put up any microphone and it just sounds better than anything you've ever recorded. And it was Sound City A and Schnee's Room. And that was it. And
Wow.
not Abbey Road, not,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
those are
Yeah.
fantastic rooms that do it, but not like the 57 that ended up pointed at the floor because the stand was broken is still like the best sounding drum mic you've ever heard.
Yeah, man, it's such a special room. It's again, like, I'm so happy you say that, because I feel like I say it enough. As I'm not a seller, I'm a buyer. I'm not a hype guy. But let me tell you, this room is, again, one of the most amazing sounding rooms I've ever worked in.
Yeah.
Uh, and it's a popular room. People love it. They camp themselves out there for months at a time, and it's super private. And we got amazing microphones. We switched when I took over. We switched the console just to make it more appealing to the current. So we changed all the outboard console and all that. It's thankfully it's doing well, and it's there. I mean, the thing that gives me, that I can sleep at night is knowing that no one's gonna come by it and kick us out.
Which is the story of your life.
Yeah, yeah, man. I feel
Yeah.
like someone's gonna walk in and be like, "All right, man, time to go." I'm like, "Oh, all right, got," you know.
So, wait, I should know this. Was it a commercial studio before 81? It wasn't, right? I mean, Bill built it, right?
He built it from the ground
Yeah.
up. Yeah,
Okay, that's what I thought. So it had never been commercial. I mean,
it was.
obviously, all the records he made were done there, and he would let a few people come in and book it. But
I know. I knew the landlord. I know the landlord, but she actually grew up in that. Back in whatever I don't know, 50s. It was it was like someone lived there, and then it became a garage, like an he had a auto shop, auto mechanic shop, and then Bill, I think, took over and just built it from the ground up.
right. Well, let's creep a little bit further north on Lancashire. So you got a restaurant
I got a
venue
restaurant. I
thing.
don't recommend getting into the studio business nor the restaurant business. Two businesses that I don't allow in. Yeah, first, that about 5 years ago, it was one of those, whether it's midlife crisis or or mixing the same record 300 times, and it was a very uninspiring time for me. I didn't think I was gonna quit, because I can't quit. Um, but I thought I was not going through a good time creatively. Just I feel like, there was a restaurant there before, and we would, take a year break and go have a glass of wine all the time. And one of the owner at the time came up to me and asked me if I would help since I'm in music, I can help do a club. I'm like, a club, like a dum, 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 that type of club. She's like, yeah, I'm like, no, of course not. I hate clubs. Even in my prime, I didn't go to clubs. No. And then I said, look, but if you do live music, then maybe I can help. And that's really what, kind of triggered that. I always, I thought, you know what? Talking to my mom, mijo, like they always say, follow your passion, right? That's what everyone says when you're in a rut. And I thought about it. I'm like, shit, what are my passions? I've been in the studio since I was 15, and it's definitely music is still my passion. I'm still a music fan. Uh, and food, travel the world, going to restaurants, right? Like, I'm a foodie, and I've been collecting wine since I was like 18, so I thought, all right, the trifecta. So eventually, very long story short, because I could literally write a book about this place on
Which
the
you
journey.
should do, actually.
The journey alone, yeah, just about verse, by the way.
Yeah, no, exactly.
So we fast forward. I ended up thinking, you know what? The studio's right next door. I want to, I feel like I've mixed enough records. Now I want a new challenge, and the new challenge is I want to create an environment where musicians can come and be captured in a way like as if we were at a Schnee studio with the best microphones, the best acoustically treated room, and the best instruments and all of that. So that was the dream of building a studio big enough to and putting a restaurant in it. And that's really what it is. It's a studio with a restaurant in it and a performance space where we have an SSL at the place, a 300, where we capture content, and that's what we're doing. So we have live music every night from Tuesdays to Saturdays, and with no PR, we reopened 4 months ago, almost five. Well, first of all, going back, we opened 3 months into, and then the pandemic hit,
Yeah.
so we shut down immediately. And I gotta say, the silver lining is in COVID for us and Verse was the best thing that happened, because it gave me time to really, really understand the business, maybe understand what the identity of what Verse, you know, I thought Verse was gonna be like, and how you pivot. My favorite word in the restaurant business is pivot. And how and just finding the right menu, the right culture, the right staff. And before pre-pandemic, I don't know if we would have made it, to be honest with you, with some of the culture that we had. And that those 16 months, man, it gave me the opportunity to really educate myself. And then we reopened 4 months ago, like I said, and with new culture, new menu, new chef, new management, the whole nine. And it's all been word of mouth, no PR, no marketing. It's all internal. And we're, man, knock on wood, we're doing so good right now. And we're actually having a private performance, not private, but semi-private performance this Friday, Saturday, and we're cutting a live album. So that was so finally the dream is coming true. Of it's going to be Terrace Martin presents, and for those of you who don't know Terrace Martin, he to Pimp a Butterfly, he has very responsible for Kendrick's success. He's producing Herbie Hancock's new album, so quality, and he's got some good friends, that are going to come up, and we're going to record an album. We're going to put it on vinyl. We're going to release it as an NFT collection, So I'm trying to like look ahead and do things like unique things that really help the artist. I feel like I created Verse for artists and for us to be able to capture performances, live performances. Look, we have so I feel like we have the best of both worlds. We can obviously capture it in the studio and now capture it live, and the sound system in there is incredible. We went with Meyer, the best fucking company out there. Helen Meyer and John they saw the vision with me, and they took a big gamble on me, and I gotta say for that I'm eternally thankful to them. And we created a special place, man, and people are feeling it. People are liking it. We're becoming a destination place where the food is actually really good, and the music is amazing. We're having a ton of musicians, and the drinks are there. So the trifecta. So we're every weekend we do something really cool and special, and that's, man, it's given me a new life, and even in the studio mixing, because that business is so tough as you can imagine. And everyone's like, oh, the restaurant business is the toughest. They're right. Everyone's right. Very low margins, high volume, low margins, a lot of room for error. So and a lot of personalities. Uh, but it's giving me, so then when I come in and I mix records, it's like fuck, man. I feel like
Taking a break.
rejuvenated. Oh yes, I'm taking a break, and it's given me a whole new, I don't know, fresh perspective on mixing records. Almost like being in love with the art form again. Not that I ever fell out of love, but just confused. That you just got to do the cycle, the metamorphosis, and how you evolve as a person and in your career. So I feel like Verse has given me this insane amount of like appreciation that I had before, but I have it on a deeper level now for what we do, and I don't know if it's made me a better mixer because I don't, it's maybe, but it's definitely given me this new life in the studio. And where before I was kind of, like I said, I talked about being comfortable and being, not that I ever was comfortable, but subconsciously I was thinking of other things, like whether what's the next phase in your life, what's the
Right.
next chapter, right? And I think we all think like that naturally. So for me, was like it's giving me this new energy on the mixing end, and I'm having fun, man. I'm having a lot of fun, a lot of work, a lot of challenges, but man, one thing I learned about myself is I just like challenges, and I embrace it, the hard work that comes with it, and the and how you have to adapt to different scenarios, and how you hopefully become a better leader, and and being conscious of all those things, and it's an exciting new chapter for me, and whatever happens happens. That to me is not the outcome, that's the silly saying, is not the destination, is the journey. And I'm
Right.
really really enjoying the journey, and I'm meeting so many new people that I would have never had access to, personalities wise, if I was just a studio rat. So I'm, we're in the same room for 10, 12, 15 hours a day,
Yeah.
giving me just a new, just perspective on everything. So for that reason, again, whatever happens in the future, it's already a success in my mind.
That's awesome. So I got two questions about it. One is, well, do you want to talk a little more specifically about the sound system? Because it's not just like a PA, like it's
Yes.
serious.
There's it's an immersive. Well, first it's a convolution physical room, so we can actually make it sound inside. You can make it sound like a tight jazz club, and we can go from the Walt Disney Hall to the Lincoln Center to the Taj Mahal, and it will. I mean, when you hear it, it really fucks you up because it's incredible what they've been able to do, and it's a noise cancellation system as well. So even on Saturday, we almost had 200 people in there, in and out. And at one point, we had about 110, and I went and checked it out. And you can still, imagine each table has a spotlight on them, right? And the table next to you, you can't hear their conversation. No matter how much you try,
That's amazing.
you just hear energy and you hear few words, but you cannot make it out. But then the same person, the same distance, person that's across from you, you can hear everything. And so it's almost like you're in this bubble, and it's that zone is the phase is flipped. So it's kind of cancels out. But we have 60 plus my speakers all over the place. We have 8 subwoofers. We have 19 microphones, and the microphones are picking up the energy. So it's the Charlie Brown effect, where you hear energy, but you can't you can't make out what they're saying because you're hearing the bar maybe as loud as that table next to you because
Right.
of speakers, right? And then we, they phase canceled all of the silverware, so you don't hear any, clink clink clink, and that's really important because for me was capturing good content. So the artist that's playing, they don't hear that annoying laugh or conversation right in front of them, and they don't hear people eating in front of them either.
Right.
So that as an artist, we're changing the perception of what a quote supper club is. Back in the 40s, 50s, when we would go out, not we, but people went out, they they got dressed up and they went to eat, and then they had their martini, their steak, and they always had a live performance, right? That was part of going out. Somehow in the 60s, I don't know when that happened, where that stopped. That kind of, and so to me was like, what would that be in 2021, 2022? Like, how can we, well, we're not going to have a steak. We're going to have hopefully some, we call it Angelino cuisine. We're not going to have a martini. Maybe you have a cocktail, and we have music that's not jazz, but maybe it's a pop band, or maybe it is a jazz band, or maybe whatever it is. It's just quality musicianship. And I got to tell you, man, what we discovered is like people are not used to that, but they love it. they love live music while they're eating, while they paying attention, they're having a conversation. So it's not like you're there to see a musical performance. You're not there just for that. You're not there just to eat. You're not there just to drink. But it's part of the soup, the whole experience. And we're discovering that that is something that is needed. You know that in the entertainment capital of the world, which is LA, nothing exists quite like that, and it's a shame. And now, hopefully, we can, there'll be copycats because I feel like this, we're employing a ton of musicians. We're employing a lot of people that are really, really, really into music and in the trifecta, and guests are coming from all over. I mean, we've had guests coming from Texas because they heard about us, coming from Vegas, and when
Wow.
we're in LA, we're gonna go to Verse, and so it's finally happening, and from the restaurant side of things, and for me, capturing content like what we're about to do this Friday, it's we're gonna release probably 100 vinyls. We'll destroy the master, and then it'll be sort of like that NFT, and then we'll also release it with some digital content so that it becomes so that hopefully the musicians can have a new platform,
Right.
to be able to monetize their art form. So again, this is all for the artist, man, and hopefully I always say it's taking the being a fly in the wall in the recording studio to a new level, and hopefully that happens, this Friday, and we've done it twice already with live albums. Hopefully these flies on the wall can have a good time and see what a recording is like,
And
and because
I love that
like
you're catering to the musician, but also to the diner. Because I can't tell
yeah,
you how many meals Debbie and I've had where we don't say a fucking word because the table next to us is so loud that we just sit, we
yeah,
eat, we get out to the parking lot, laugh, get in the car, and go home.
yeah,
Like
yep,
it's
yeah, yeah.
it's a
It's
problem.
annoying. It's annoying, and there's studies on the psychology of that too. It's and how you adapt to it, and how men, especially as we get older, we hear different frequencies because of your hair follicles, and how what that frequency is, and how annoying that can be. Not adverse, man. It's an incredible sound system. And again, not taking any credit, but giving Meyer all the credit for helping me, build this with this vision that I had, and they were able to, help out, and it was beyond my expectations, and for that reason, I think people are connecting, and that's the one thing that they all say is like we can actually there's this 5 piece band and we're 10 feet away and we can still almost whisper to each other and have a full on conversation. And the food is amazing. So
And you're not making the musicians feel like shit by talking while they're
exactly.
playing.
Yep. Yep. Because they don't hear anything. They hear the energy again. So it's, hopefully it's a win-win-win. It's something that's never been done before, quite like this, So I hope that, people keep embracing it, and hopefully we get the support to be able to keep hiring musicians and keep doing really unique content, and just keep pushing the envelope, and hopefully be forward with it, using technology. I always say I run it like a tech company, because we have digital platforms on how to run the restaurant and how to, just a whole list of things using digital platforms to help us be a better business, and be hopefully a successful business.
That's amazing. And I love the fact that you've got musicians hired 5 nights a week playing.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Yep.
I mean, and that just in and of itself, booking that many artists that's amazing. And
Yeah, man.
has it turned into a venue where touring musicians will play it yet, or is it mostly local?
I think it's all local, but look, we're only 4 or 5 months in. I mean, I think hopefully in the next couple of years, it hopefully becomes a name everyone recognizes in the industry, and they trust. And I do believe that, hey, if the Stones are playing SoFi, maybe they'll come and do a little,
A little
little
secret
jam
show?
session
Yeah.
afterwards type of thing. That's I hope that happens because it's too good for them not to do it. And I think as labels and artists start discovering the quality of it, again, I'm a buyer, not a seller. We have done zero PR, zero marketing. Maybe in the next year we'll start ramping that up so that more established musicians and artists can hear about it, and maybe that'll happen. But to me, again, even if we were to stay here, employing local musicians, touring musicians, I mean, they're all
Yeah.
pretty badasses, I'm satisfied with that. And then, but I do believe that it's going to lead to major artists. I mean, if we've had a ton of them. They do a lot of, we do a lot of video shooting, a lot of content creation and stuff like that. So we've been doing that. I mean, we've done a ton of photo shoots too. Um, so it's becoming, and then the cool thing is on any given night, I mean, it's a pretty stacked room. You have a lot of music industry people, a lot of film because of the neighborhood, and they're all embracing it. A lot of executives, a lot of TV film, and a lot of music cats. So on
That's
any given
awesome, man.
go in there and see someone that you may recognize.
And it feels like it can also fill a hole that, I mean, it's been gone for years. There's been this hole that used to be, like in New York, could be the Village Vanguard and the Blue Note and
Right.
the
Yeah.
clubs where that level of musicianship, but in genres that wouldn't necessarily book gigantic venues, can
Mhm.
be touring and have places to play that are sympathetic to the music and not just some shitty place because of the
Exactly.
size.
Exactly. Yeah. Fingers crossed.
Man, awesome. Well, I know next time I'm coming to LA, I will book a table
Gotta come.
months in advance
You
so I
gotta
can
come.
get one.
I know somebody. I know somebody.
Oh,
So
good. Nice. I'll eat in the kitchen. That's fine.
we
Well,
have
let,
a chef's table in the kitchen, so it's my favorite table. So
I'll bet. I'll bet.
uh,
Man, it
no,
just sounds amazing. I mean, obviously, I'm a huge fan of the mixes, but just the way you think about it and the way you do it and what you're trying to do, it's yeah, it's inspiring. It's great. Really, really great.
it's crazy because again we get pigeonholed, right? I mean, if I had a dime for everyone to try to talk me out of everything I've ever done, then I wouldn't be here talking about it. You know, I believe that we have a. I don't know if it's. I don't want to sound too cheesy, and it's a sense of responsibility that we have, but in a weird way, maybe being from a different country, being against all odds. I always have this thing in my head that, look, man, I'm doing this hopefully for that 12-year-old kid right now that will have someone he can at least relate to, and
Yeah.
I think that's the least we can do. We've been given this amazing platform and amazing opportunity. I think it's time to hopefully inspire someone that doesn't think they have they don't have a chance, and they can see someone like myself, like that they can relate to. Again, being from a different country, and I mean, I'm the living proof of the American dream. Like if you work hard and if you put your everything you have into it, the sky's the limit. So hopefully, listen, hopefully this will be inspiring to a lot of those kids. The 12-year old me. Like,
Yeah.
and when I was, or maybe 15, when I was trying to get in the industry, then nobody looked like me in the industry. So it was like I didn't really have someone that to look up to, and I think that that's really important. We all, if we can have somebody that, oh, if that motherfucker did it, I can do it too.
But I think it's also, and I was thinking this earlier, like we were talking about reference mixes and things, like whatever. But it's always the idea while you're mixing is you need perspective. You've got to constantly be a fresh listener. You need to be the consumer and all that. But it's like your childhood has given you that ability to keep resetting your view on what you're doing in life. You're not getting stuck on the tiny minutia of trying to like, I want to mix that record, but that guy's got like, who cares? Like, you know what you've got, you know what you can do, and you dream and do stuff. And it's huge, man. A lot of people have ideas, and not everybody actually follows through on any of them.
Yeah.
And you're following through on pretty much all of them.
Listen, I don't. It's hard. It's not. It's not easy. But I feel like, fuck, man, you got to take chances. Again, mixers and engineers, they always, we're the lowest hanging fruit, and people don't think we can do things. And to me, I got that chip on. I'm like, when you tell me you can't do something, if I believe 100% in it, I don't listen. I
Yeah.
actually use it as motivation. Like, I mean, listen, I was in high school and I wanted to be, I don't know if I told this story on a few episodes ago, but, people try to talk me out of it. Like they wanted me to fix gear. They wanted me to, because English is obviously my second language, and they didn't think I could be in the room with an artist. So, hey, why don't you go in the back and fix gear? So to me, that I'll never forget that moment when that professor told me that, and told my other friend that I was with, giving him all the look different than me, but he was like, yeah, you can come to this school, you'll be a this and you're an engineer and blah blah blah, and you, by the way, you can fix gear. I'll never forget that. It's still like it happened yesterday. I can, if I knew how to draw, I can describe, draw the room, and I remember every the wood, the console, the speakers, everything. Him telling me that, and I
Wow. No, you
not
didn't tell that one, man.
I
Fuck.
did. Yeah. I held that one, and I still have it here. Not because he was an a-hole or anything, but I use that as motivation because this guy is literally like, I'm trying to pursue a dream, and he just like, nope, you're not gonna make it. So therefore, but if you want to be in the music industry, there is a way you can do that. And I'll never forget that. And everything I did, I was like, just for that guy, I'm like, and many, many, many others that said I couldn't do it. It was like that chip, and that like, I'm gonna prove it to, not to them because it doesn't matter. I don't, but to me, to prove it to myself, and maybe someday, I told you so. Even though I'll never do that, but it's motivation, man. It's that
Yeah.
motivation that like, oh, really? You don't think I can do that? I wonder why. Your perception of me, that's interesting, and I think that happens on a daily basis with everyone, and it continues to happen. The restaurant, I was like, everyone was like, I was trying to raise capital for it, and people laughed. They're like, "You're a studio rat. What do you know about restaurants?" You're correct. You're 100% correct on
But
that
so
one.
what?
But
Yeah.
let's dream bigger. And nobody. Let me tell you, nobody believed in that. I mean, nobody. Like, again, I'm a buyer, not a seller. That was the hardest thing, to sell the idea of what it is. And people like, dude, just stick to making records.
I think there's a weird perception issue where, like, I mean, first of all, people think we don't work for a living, and fair enough. Like, there are plenty of jobs that are a lot harder, but it is hard work. And you talk about like the mental fatigue at the end of a day. Like, we're working very, very hard at what we do. Like,
Yeah.
that's
Yep.
whatever. And some people will believe that, some people won't. But I think what gets overlooked a lot is, especially for mixers, we are 100% entrepreneurs all the time.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can't be more self-employed unless you're an artist who's completely
Right.
independent. Like that
Yeah.
that's kind of it.
Mhm.
And so we're constantly doing that. And I think that, I mean, I think we're similar, where we love a project
Mhm.
because it's like, oh, that isn't mixing and I can work through that from start to finish. Like, it doesn't matter how hard it is. That's like, oh, that's doable. This next mix, I have absolutely no idea. I
Yeah.
really hope that's going to work out. But restaurant, no problem. Like, even if you know nothing about it. And part of it is ignorance is bliss, but part of it is, like you said, it's reinvigorated you in the studio just because you're doing something else that's hard, that's outside of it.
Mhm. And again, going back to make sure you don't do things for the money. Really, I mean, you got to do it based out of passion. Passion is gonna get you through those fucking walls, man. Like, not the money. The passion that you have for it, you're gonna have 20 motherfuckers that are gonna say no, and those are the walls that you got to get through. And only passion and the drive are gonna get you there.
Yeah.
Nothing else will. Like, you've seen dollar signs, and maybe that car, house, whatever drives you, it ain't gonna be enough to get you there. Because this, I always say you got to get used to rejection more than praise, right? And some people see it as rejection, other people see it as constructive criticism, and I see it as constructive criticism when people said, "Fuck, dude, you're a studio rat. There's no way you can do this." And I'm like, "You're probably right, but that's constructive criticism. So therefore, I'm gonna go and take some classes from Wharton on analytics so that I can run the restaurant like a tech company, and I'm gonna do all the things that I need to do to hopefully put me in the best position to succeed. That's it. Whether it succeeds or not, what is success, right? To me, it's like not trying is not an option for me. You know, that to me, then I would feel like a,
Yeah.
like, but trying and failing is admirable, and I can see how it's scary as shit, but it's admirable, and you gotta just try and do it and be smart about it, of course. You know, just
Yeah.
be strategic about it and surround yourself with people that believe in what you're trying to build. You know,
And also,
yeah,
if you don't chase money, you're never going to do something you're not passionate about.
yeah,
You know, and there's no way to know. It's like the conversation. I'm sure you've had it with bands throughout your entire career, where like, well, do you think like it would be more successful if we did this with this song? Or like, who the fuck knows, man? Diane Warren and Dr. Luke are like the only two people I can think of who actually know how to write a song that will be popular.
yeah.
Nobody else on the planet knows how to do it
Nobody.
really. So don't
Yeah.
try. You do your best art all the time, and what you're doing with verse is as much art as what you're doing in the studio.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Well, next time you're in LA, you gotta come.
I absolutely will. I absolutely will. And I'm very aware of your time, and we're almost at 2 hours. So can we do a quick Q&A?
Yeah,
Let's get
let's do
Mark in
it.
here and do some Q&A. So we skipped over a bunch of records, but, you know, whatever. Whatever.
Whatever. Yeah,
So much fun, Manny. This has been great.
so good to revisit some of the records and talk about what we love the most and talking shit.
Yeah. We're going to have to talk shit about Mark soon. I think he's... Oh, there
Oh,
he
Fire
is.
away.
God, you're such a good-looking guy, brother. Oh.
Yep. God
Killing
damn.
me every time I come in here.
Fucking you guys with all your hair. I'm sick
Look
of
at
it.
that. You exfoliate.
Oh man, you're the one with the fresh haircut. Come
Oh,
on.
good. Oh,
Yeah,
Hey.
that is nice.
thank you.
All
got my
right,
hair
we're
cut
talking
once.
about hair. That means it's Q&A time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the worst transition of all time.
No.
So if you guys are on YouTube, we are taking questions over on Crowdcast. You can get to there by going to puremix.net, clicking on Andrew Talks to Awesome People, and you'll see the Crowdcast link. You can submit your question. Everybody upvotes each other's questions, and we start with the most voted question. So that today comes from, the username is Callum, and he says, I'd love if you could talk about your use of automation throughout the track and fader writing. Not being from the analog world, it's daunting to know what to do.
So, okay, there's two ways to look at it. One is on the console, and the other one in the box. And I do different I have different approaches to both. One is if I'm on the console and I'm driving to a compressor inside the box, I need to do a post, on the fader on the console. So I will do rides based on that. Now, if I want to drive into the compressor, I do a lot of pre-rides so that it kind of glues certain things. So if I have something going into the compressor, I will ride that as opposed to a post. So you gotta understand why you're doing the rides. Are you gluing? Are you trying to make things kind of sound like they're closer together, or are you trying to just make sure it sounds louder or it comes out in the mix? So first, I would ask myself that question. If it's trying to glue, always do and just make sure you watch that. How much you're driving into it, and if you're just trying to make something louder with that glue, then do it post. Now you have you gotta worry about your stereo bus and how much processing you have going on in there as well. I find myself that if I drive into the compressor or limiter on the stereo bus, then you may have some problems. So now start maybe EQing certain things. So automation, I don't shy away from automating EQs. So it's not only level. I'm not shy from shit. We just had a whole conversation about doing automating a multiband on the stereo bus. So I'm not shy about automation, but just make sure you ask yourself that question beforehand. Like, are you doing it to find glue or this, and that, or just to bring that sound up in the mix?
And you don't have to automate, but you don't have to not automate. Like, I mean, I use clip gain constantly. So
Yep.
there's a lot of stuff where I would have been writing faders long ago, but now I don't have to because I'm constantly doing tweaky little automation things, which if I did them at the beginning, because I'm in in the box, then those faders are no longer available to completely rebalance the track easily because once you put breakpoints. So I tend to avoid fader automation until pretty late in the process, and sometimes I never get there.
Yeah, funny you say that because my challenge, I challenge myself every mix not to automate, and that means that get everything sort of sitting in the perfect spot. And then, like you said, Andrew, like at the end, you may now do very, very subtle rides, but challenge yourself to balance, EQ, compress, you know, and so that you don't have to, because I made this mistake so many times where I start automating before I should, and then you start chasing your tail. So my approach is I do that last, like you.
But at the same time, there's nothing wrong with turning up every drum fill a lot.
Yeah.
Like if that's what the song wants, that's what the song gets.
Exactly. I hope that answered that.
Wonderful. Okay. All right. Our next question comes from Matt Langdale, and I'm going to edit it a little bit on the end. If you were forced to buy a new plugin tomorrow, which would it be and why would it be omnichannel? I'm just kidding. He didn't have the omnichannel on the end of it. It's my bad joke.
Man, I'm not gonna give my secret. So no, doing the plugin with Waves was such a, it was really interesting, and and it was really fulfilling, and it was really challenging, and I haven't thought about doing any more plugins at the moment, just because I've been busy with other things. But I feel like I feel like room simulation is going to be a big thing in the future, like in the near future. It's already here, but we're talking about Schnee. Like I would love someday to have a virtual Schnee, room so that everybody in the world can have access to it. So if I were to do another plugin, I would do probably something like that.
And there's some really great reverbs out there too. I mean, I'm mixing a classical record right now, so I've had to really investigate and sort of build from scratch a lot of reverb chains. And I've watched a lot of Alan Meyerson videos, I can tell you that. And it's there is some really, really cool stuff out there. But yeah, I think the room thing, and especially thinking about capturing rooms circularly, that's not, but in an immersive way so that they can be used on the multiple sources coming from different directions as opposed to stereo source and then a big surround room. I think that'll be really interesting too. Now, but was this person looking for a recommendation of a plugin that exists or?
Yeah. They were saying if you were forced to buy a new plugin tomorrow,
omnichannel,
which would it
obviously.
be and why?
The Manny Signature Series and omnichannel. It's all you need. Really.
There's these Manny Marroquin bundle. Yeah. The only reason why I came on this show is to sell plugins. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
talk shit with Andrew.
Yeah, and we'll pay him for that question in a minute.
Yeah, exactly. Nice. Okay, next one is from Overlord of eBay. Man, that makes me nervous. That guy's probably pretty serious. Okay, what are your basic decisions when mixing bass lines, particularly for more bass forward mixes with stuff like Bruno Mars?
Well, it's to me the two of the hardest things to do is mix low end and vocals, because nowadays in pop music you have a kick, you have probably multiple kicks, you have 808s, you have bass, so there's a lot of information and not a lot of room down there. So I always think of a focal point. If a bass line is doing a rhythmic part, like if it's kind of grooving and it kind of makes me do this, then I put that to me will be the emphasis, right? Other things, I'm mixing a Pusha T record right now where it's all 808s and nothing else exists except 808s and vocals, right? So just make sure you know what the source is. If the source, if you have a bass that's moving and it's playing melodic parts and rhythmic parts, but the 808 is constant, which one's Batman and which one's Robin, so you gotta, so if Batman is like the bass line, then make sure that's your focal point and then color around the bass line. So in other words, if it's somewhere, I don't know if they can see me, but if it's somewhere in your gut, then how do you drop the 808 and get rid of what's fighting in that frequency spectrum. And now you got Batman and Robin, right? Now it could be the opposite. It could be a Pusha T track, and the 808 is constant, and the bass line happens to be not the focal point. Then you can chop some of the bass off the bass, and then you can actually do maybe more tone, so that now you have Batman being the 808, and that takes up a lot of the room, and then you still have some type of rhythm from the bass line. And the key here is how you connect those sounds. That's the biggest key.
Yeah, I think I never do this consciously, but there's always a distinction between the rhythmic low end and the melodic low end, and that could be the same instrument, or it could be two different instruments. Kick and bass are your obvious choices. But for the rhythmic low end, you've got to be aware of the entire groove. It goes with the hat and the snare and the rhythm of the vocal and rhythm guitars or whatever it is. And it's really easy to mess with the groove of the song by like making the bass instrument too important down there. And now the really sparse kick pattern is not so sparse anymore. It's just like little accents in this wall of low end. So don't try and make the instruments sound great. Make them work, do their jobs, which is basically what Manny said. So I just do what Manny said.
And one thing to keep in mind too is like we tend to solo things. I honestly don't solo as much, because like you said, you brought up a really good point. It almost doesn't matter what the sound sounds like. It's like when it's soloed. Does it work with, I say, the suit, the painting? Does it, so make sure that you solo things to see technically if there's something wrong with it, or there's something like maybe there's a buzz or low pitch that's not, that you got to take out. But don't listen to the instrument. At least I try not to solo things.
Yeah, I mean, you do just to investigate, so you know what it is once you drop it back in.
Right.
But yeah, you just get the important stuff right. And this is like, I've had this conversation about the Atmos mixing too, because obviously you've got to match a stereo mix bus and mastering, which can be really, really difficult. But you don't have to match it on every instrument. You match it on the important stuff, and then the other stuff can sound like anything you want while you fly it around the room. It's fine.
That's right. 100%.
Awesome. Okay, next question is from Joris, and he asks, "Hi Manny, how did you get that incredible reverb effect on Sunflower? Is it a delay reverb, a big pre-delay? Is there a sidechain, an automation?
He's smiling.
And what reverb did you use?"
I love that song. That's one of my favorite songs, actually.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's one of my favorite songs. I can't take all the credit for that one, because Lou Bell, the producer, is one amazing producer, and he plays around with a lot of reverbs. My job at that point is to kind of blend it with post, and we're working on the new post album right now, and my job is to make sure that exists in the that it cuts through some songs. And so I really take what he's done and I try to emphasize it or hide it or feature it on different sections of the song. But the reverb, itself, I mean, he's done it, and he uses anything from Valhalla to we things that we all use, the Manny Marroquin reverb,
mostly that.
Yeah, it's all that. So it's I mean, look, I love the Valhalla stuff. He actually uses some R verb that he chains to a different verb. He does a lot of chaining, a lot of like maybe 2-3 different reverbs, and we all do. And then some of them, like I remember the D verb works really well in pop music because it cuts through.
Easy to hear.
Easy to hear, exactly. But like a Bricasti wouldn't necessarily cut through in pop music, and I think we talked about it before.
Yeah, adding the distortion on the output of that to make it come up. Yeah.
So I would say for reverbs, I mean, just listen to the source. EQ. Don't be afraid of EQing the reverb. Just if you put it up and it doesn't work, make sure it's in the mix, and then start adding EQ to your reverbs. And I think that's the most effective tool to put it in the mix and EQ the reverb. Or if it doesn't, or a preset. I'm a preset type of guy too. Like just go through as many presets, and in the mix you'll see what you'll see what blends in and what what the emotional connection is to that song, to that track or vocal or whatever it is.
And there is something, I mean, and I'm a newbie at reverbs. I really am. I'm shitty at them. But there's something incredible about having two reverbs going. With any one reverb, there will be some anomaly, something about it that will make it stick out and stuff will sound too wet. And then you start to bury it, but then it's not doing its job. Two reverbs, it doesn't even really fucking matter what they are. Just get two reverbs up there and all of a sudden they convolve with each other. And it sounds drier but more natural. And I mean, I've found it combinations of Deverb and Valhalla or like just anything. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, yeah.
So layer
It's like
them.
basically just a Manny reverb.
Well, yeah, yeah, definitely. Two Manny reverbs.
He's a buyer, not a seller. Okay, next one, kind of in the same vein here. Would it be possible to explain on how to achieve depth in a mix, more specifically on vocals?
I mean, yeah.
Anything to add to it?
Look, I mean, the most obvious one would be a reverb, right? If you put more reverb, like it goes further away from you. If you take it out, then it comes towards you. So, how much depth do you want? I guess I tend to like either putting a ton of reverb on things or putting just enough so that you hear the effect. So I know you asked about depth, but what I try to do with width as well is like if you find a super tight reverb and then you EQ the tail end of it so that it becomes almost like a harmonizer. So now you put it in and it becomes wider, and then you put another reverb that's a mono reverb, just put everything up the middle, and then that's how you start creating a little bit of depth. It's easy just to wash it all because that's the definition of depth, but what you may want to try, which I've done I'm sure we've all done this before and many times, is maybe the verse is a little forward and maybe the chorus is a little further away from you, but when it goes away from you, you gotta have that impact. So what I would do is I would EQ the chorus is different than the verses so that it comes forward, but then it's got depth. So there's so many little things you can do to create emotion and depth and height and width, dynamics, which is the most important word in mixing, in my opinion, because it doesn't have to be dynamics. It's not louder and softer. It's just dynamics to me is emotional, difference in emotion for each part of the song. So I would say, look, it's the same thing that we all have said many, many times. You can add a little bit of depth with some reverb, but just make sure that play with the width of the reverb is what I'm trying to say, and it'll be more, I don't know, not more efficient, but it'll give you a different dimension. And then the other thing is play with the different sections, because not every section in the song will have will you need that same depth. And even if it's subtle, maybe even if we don't hear it, it's enough to make it, like your body kind of goes up a little bit. So just make sure that don't just add depth just to add depth. Add it to. I'm always conscious, and I think we talked about it before too. Conscious of the next section. So whatever section you're in the song, be conscious of what's coming next.
Yeah, you've got to leave room. You've got to leave room. There's nothing worse than making the verse too big.
Yeah, and vice versa, right? If you're like, here, you're conscious of what you're gonna do to do the opposite too. So, and that goes, and that makes it for subconsciously you wanting to hit repeat, and that's really what we're in the business of. Just, hey, how do we make you hit repeat?
Yeah, and having things happen for sections of the song. The goal would be to have 10 things turn on in the chorus and nobody would notice.
Right. Yeah. Yep.
Like that's it. Just everything gets bigger.
Mm-hmm. But your body knows it. Your body
exactly
kind of feels something, that a lift, but that's it. Yeah. To be able to master that.
And you don't. And the perfect argument for not always wanting depth is the John Mayer story you told.
Right. Exactly.
That has zero depth on it except the body of his voice.
Yep. And then you go even a step further. I feel like a lot of us are, concerned about sonic things, right? But none of this matters unless the song tells you to do it, which sounds so cliche.
Mm.
But going back to the John Mayer, I mean, the song needed that, and the song asked for that, and just make sure you pay attention to the song. It's funny, we talk about tricks and things that we can do, but what if the song is not asking for that? So just be mindful of that. Be mindful of the lyrics. Listen to the lyrics. This time solo the vocal from beginning to end, and see what the song is really about. And that's gonna give you way more inspiration too, on on what to do.
Awesome. Cool. Okay, next one this is also from Javier. He asked the last question. I forgot to say his name. How hot is the signal going into the console when you mix?
Fuck, you don't see the meters move.
Those are mix running indicators.
Yeah. Oh, I smashed the
Mix
deck.
running indicators.
I'm like, yeah, I think it's gonna fucking, smoke is gonna come out of those meters. I hit it really, really, really hard. Yeah, that's the beauty about the SSL or these consoles. You can smash them. You can abuse them, and it's rare that they break up. It's rare. So yeah, to answer your question, yeah. I'm at a 69.
Nice. So can you touch on why, like briefly?
Yeah, to get a sound, to get some personality out of it. Why do we use a Pultec, or an LA2A, or an 1176? Just to drive the signal to the point of color. The coloration is slightly different than what you would get, say, in the box. So not better or worse, just different, just a different tone.
Mm-hmm.
I always say knowing your gear, whether it's outboard or plugins, just kind of know what that tone is going to give you, and try to relate that to either a color, shape, whatever it is. It doesn't matter. But next time you're looking for that tone, that shape, that color, what to pull up, because there's just too many fucking plugins nowadays. So you'll get lost, and what you'll do is you'll just put it based on the GUI because it looks kind of cool, or someone, or you read, or you heard you heard something on Andrew Scheps' podcast, and but you just gotta know your tools, man. I'd rather have 10 very useful tools than 1,000 somewhat semi. Know 100% of 10.
Yeah.
And start there.
And every analog circuit, as you start to push signal through it, turns into a limiter with harmonic distortion, and they all have a different knee as you approach the voltage rails, and they do. And digital stuff, unless you program it in there, does not do that. It has no knee. You go from exactly the same sounding fantastic until it's complete clipping. And obviously, no one leaves their digital stuff to do that anymore. But with floating point, you don't have to have that limit up top, whereas analog circuits have a voltage rail. You cannot output a voltage bigger than the voltage rail. Period. It's physically impossible. So what happens as you approach it in every analog circuit's just different.
Yep. And knowing that color is really important. What happens when how much you push, and that's another tool.
That's always been around too. I mean, people think it's the loudness wars. There's nothing to do with that. I mean, the Glyn Johns recording acoustic guitars with a Neve preamp was always, you go one click too far, then you come back.
Yep.
Awesome.
Watching him work in the new Beatles documentary, by the way, is just so great.
Haven't seen.
And what a badass wardrobe, man! You're gonna change the way you dress when you watch Glyn.
I need to. Shit.
Yeah. Gonna have some fancy coats to go into verse with.
Yeah.
Okay. Next question is from Raymond, and he says, "I'd like to know a little bit more about Manny's process. What's the first thing you look for in a mix? When do you start adding effects, mix bus processing?" And do you use a lot of parallel compression? Basically everything. We want to know everything, man. So are elements mainly processed on their own, or are they grouped and processed together, etc.?
Well, look, in today's world, having roughs, a lot of those decisions have been made for you. I can't say that I strip everything and start from from the ground up. Never do that. You don't need to, actually. So today, most of those decisions have been made for you. Now the trick today into today's mixer, the key is, it's like a chef. We have all these ingredients. How much salt, how much acid, how much of it do you put into this thing? And my approach is just about emotion. I listen to the rough. That's the first thing I do, and I used to take physical notes. Now I take mental notes on what I want to keep, what I want to do. So if you're looking at a mixer from, hey, how do you decide to put reverb on this and that? That to me, in my shoes, I don't think of it that way. I see it as an emotion, and I think that's the biggest mistake that a lot of people make. It's like, how much reverb do you, how much low end, and how much this, and
the answer to everything is just yes.
None of that matters. You know what matters is, how does the song make you feel? And then my approach is as needed. So I can't say that I'm conscious about how much top end, low end, reverb, kick, snare. I'm not conscious about any of that. I'm like, does the snare like is that piercing snare? Why is it like that? Well, you know what? Maybe the production isn't that. Maybe it's a younger producer, and it needs a little bit of that Tabasco, and I'm gonna mind fuck it and give you a loud ass snare that all you're gonna think about is the snare and the vocal, because the rest of the production isn't up to par maybe for the rest of the songs on the album. So there's a million different things that you got to think about, but I never go into it with, oh, I wonder how much reverb I'm gonna put today. Just use as needed. The rough, if you're a mixer and you get roughs, listen to it and see what you can make better, or not, or keep from the rough. So all those decisions kind of have been made for you. It's just a matter of what your taste is like, how you present it, and how you really create more emotion. So it sounds like a lot of people are asking obviously technical questions, and that's all good. But just make sure you pay attention to the song. The song will actually answer a lot of those questions for you. You don't even have to overanalyze it or overthink it. It will do it for you. Now, if you're a producer, that's a whole different conversation, by the way. And there's a lot of lines are blurry right now between producer and mixer and engineer. So if you're a producer mixing your own stuff, that's part of production, So make sure that, again, you're when we do like these mix with the master seminars, I always tell producers, like, hey, you gotta almost put that hat on, and be very conscious of which hat you have on. To me, that question is more of like a producer hat, like, that's a production call. Now, when you're mixing it, if you produced it, put that mixer hat on, and don't keep producing, because the biggest mistake I've seen made is producers that are mixing their own stuff. They're mixing, but they're still producing, and you're gonna just do this, and you're gonna be lost. And that's why we still have a job, because they're like, "Fuck, I can't do this. I'm so frustrating." And then you give it to someone like us, and we kind of help you finish that record, because you're too lost, you're too in it. So try not to think of it as like, what's your approach with effects and this? There is no approach. I have no approach. My responsibility is to make sure that song, and these tools, just think of them as different emotion to put into that song, because no one's gonna care what reverb you use at the end of the day. No one gives a fuck at the end of the day. You know what happens is, does this song make me want to cry, dance, hang out with my friends, do drugs, drink, whatever that is? Your responsibility is that, not to focus on reverbs and delays and all that. Just make sure you know why you're putting some of those things on the record. And I always say, does it make it sound better or feel better? And you know which one I'm going to say. I'm going to go for it.
And I think, again, it goes back to the John Mayer mix, where you didn't know that the vocal was bone dry. And what the point is there is no point at which you say, now I have to go look at the vocal and see what effects I'm going to put on it. Like, I am as likely to start with the stereo bus as I am with the kick drum EQ.
Yep,
and I'm going back and forth between those sort of things, which when you're learning, feel as though one of those things is very zoomed out and one of them is very zoomed in. They're exactly the same. They're exactly the same.
You know, we always talk about the foundation. You know, I think you do have to have a foundation. For me, as the drums, you know, maybe because I'm
Mhm.
a frustrated drummer, I always start with the drums, even if there's no drums in the song. So whatever the rhythmic section is, just have a foundation and then build from that, and build based on emotion, not necessarily on toys or EQs or any of that. Build on, you know, what we've been talking about, what's the true essence of that song. And that's our responsibility, man. That's what I feel like a lot of people forget that. We get caught up in the toys that we have, which toys are just tools. Just remember that they're just tools to help you get that emotion across, you know.
So I got to interject a question here. You talk about the
So
frustrated drummer thing. Have you ever mixed anything with Abe playing on it? And did you intentionally make him sound bad?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I actually replaced the drums one time. Wouldn't that be great if I like just replaced the drums with me playing? It sound a little crappy. Like, hey man, my drums sound weird. Yeah,
and if you guys don't know why I asked the question, go listen to episode 1.
Yes.
So we won't go back into that. But you have mixed Abe playing, which that's
I have.
yeah. Good. All right.
And that last answer was so good. I don't even know. I don't know how we top that. How are you doing on time? Because
Another 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I got a
cool.
2 o'clock here.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Cool.
Knock a couple out.
Okay. Let's see. So we had one in the chat after your SSL answer, and a couple upvotes on this one. How do you achieve that SSL sound in the box where you're slamming the SSL on the input?
I don't
They're
think
asking for any tips on that. Yeah.
physically impossible. You know, it's just like Rupert Neve said. It's an unfair comparison because one, you have an analog piece, you have a signal, a voltage going through it, and one obviously doesn't. So it's again not better or worse. You just can't. I mean, I'm the wrong person to ask because I do have an SSL here, and I don't try to fake that in the box just because I have it here. So I don't know if I'm sure Andrew would probably be better qualified.
But really, when I switched from my Neve to in the box, it was to get away from all the shit I couldn't get away from on the Neve. Like you have to hit it with a certain amount of level, otherwise you could use anything. Right? It doesn't sound like an SSL or a Neve or whatever. I mean, EQ aside, like the mix bus doesn't sound like that type of mix bus until you start to hit it. But with that comes all of the other stuff that comes with it. So I was so happy to get away from my mix leaning to one side at certain frequencies and crosstalk weirdness, and just like I couldn't give a shit about trying to recreate that part.
I have a question for you, Andrew. So if you were to have 2 amazing British assistants that set everything up for you, print and do all that,
Nope.
would you go back to that?
Nope.
Yeah.
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't at all, because what happened was when I first started mixing in the box, I just ignored all the stuff I was missing. And then I realized, like, no, I really love all that harmonic distortion, but I'm doing it now where I want it. So certain things get lots of harmonic distortion and certain things get none, and they're all meeting up in the mix bus. And sometimes the mix bus has harmonic distortion, sometimes it doesn't. So no, it took me a long time, I think, to get my head around how I wanted to approach it. But no, I wouldn't want to go back. I love my Neve, and I wish it's great to own an Neve, and I don't own one anymore. Well, I own a little baby one now, but for tracking, not for mixing. I love my workflow so much right now that I don't feel like there's anything I'm lacking.
Right. And I guess it goes down to what you're used to, right? I mean, it's really what makes you comfortable and what you're used to. I still kind of perform a mix. I still grab faders and feel it, and I'm not, and that's my workflow. I can't grab a mouse or even a little 8 fader control. I'm just not used to that, so I don't. think I
Yeah,
can. Yeah.
it's all stuff you gotta. It's that you gotta relearn some things, and there are some records where I never turn my controllers on, and there's some records they're on the whole time. Like I can't work on it without some faders, and other
Yeah.
stuff I'm absolutely fine just using clip gain and drawing stuff in, or grabbing one fader with a mouse, whatever.
Yeah, and that's what it is. It's just workflow, whatever you're used to. I feel like when I'm on the desk, I can do 10 things in 2 seconds as opposed to doing 10 things in 10 seconds. And to me, that's like to get that out. Like I can EQ here and do levels here, and I can do so many things at once that I can't do in the box. And that's just not to say that I couldn't do it in the box. I just that's just what we're used to. It's whatever your workflow is like,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. Look, and it's like sitting down for people who know Logic, sitting down in front of Pro Tools, or the other way around. Like it makes you feel dumb when you
Hmm.
switch, and then you're not creative because you can't just respond.
Yep,
So
yep,
any transition like that just takes time.
yeah, yep, exactly. Exactly.
But I have no doubt that you would be doing hellaciously great mixes in the box with no controller if that's what you had to do. You'd figure it out and you'd do it.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, yeah. I think you pivot and you
Yeah, look,
really
because it is, as they say,
evolve.
it's the ears, not the gears. And
Yep.
I was terrified to give up the gear. I
Yeah.
thought, that's it, my career is over. Like, I'll never work again, but I got to try this thing. And no, you know.
Now, I think that it would be so. Then, yeah. So then the question is it different? Because I try to recall mixes on Neves, and it's impossible. Uh, but with an SSL, like if you were, because there is something I gotta say, the reason why I haven't, it would be so much more. It would be better for me to switch, right? I mean, just flow wise, and I mean for all the good reasons, but I just have it because of the emotion I get from that feeling that I was telling you to
Yeah.
do.
And if you don't have to get away from it, I mean, because you've got assistants who can take the pain away from that.
That would be my question to a lot of mixers if they had the convenience, and thankfully I'm blessed enough to have the convenience of someone printing stems, someone setting up mixes for me, where I'm just creative. I wonder how many people would say, yes, I would love to stay out of the box, and maybe the box conversation doesn't exist. If you had the ability, I mean, I wonder how many people would then go to, you know, because again, I haven't been able to make that transition, and I've tried, but because of, I feel like a lot of people have had to do it based on that because why are you going to pay an assistant to do it? Why are you going to
Yeah.
buy a whatever, I don't know how much these are, but why are you going to go through that extra expense? But if you took all that aside and it just went for pure emotion, I wonder how many people would say, and I've asked a ton of people this question, I wonder how many would say, yeah, I would do it if that list of 30 things
But
weren't.
it's just about the workflow that you
Yeah.
enjoy doing too. Because like I said, I was terrified about doing it, and I really was. Like it was a long transition,
Oh, I'm
and
sure. I'm sure. Shit, I'm terrified
but
about changing monitors.
but the
Like
well,
I'm
yeah,
so shitty on this tens.
but the epiphany for me was I told the story before, but I was going to Chad Blake's house to have lunch with Debbie, and I had all these questions I wanted to ask him, like, how do you doing this? How you doing this? How you doing this? Because he'd been in the box for years already,
Right.
like 5 years at least, fully in the box, had already won a Best Engineered Album Grammy that was mixed completely in the box. And on the drive over there, my brain, fortunately, just said, the only answer you need is that he's already doing it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's it. So it can be done. But if you don't have to and you don't want to, then you shouldn't. Like,
Yeah.
there's no
It
reason
goes
you have
back
to do
to
it.
yeah, it goes back to workflow. I think that anybody, because we get that asked. I mean, I get it every time. Like in the box or out of the box. It's like the most common asked question.
Yeah. But if you're going to tell me that like sonically there is something that's impossible to achieve without analog circuits, like, well,
No.
yeah, there might be something specific that you wouldn't be able to recreate. But
Yep.
I don't believe for a second that a good mixer couldn't do a good mix given any tools
Absolutely.
once
Yeah.
they know enough to be creative with the tools.
Agreed.
A
Agreed.
lot of it's what you're both saying too about workflow. I mean, it's so ingrained in your subconscious once you've learned your workflow like that. Like you're not thinking about how to operate an SSL. Your hands are just doing it and you're thinking
Yeah.
Yeah.
about the song.
And
Yeah.
a big part for me,
Yeah.
I've got to say, in the last 2 years, I've gotten much more creative in the box with SoundFlow because I'm automating stuff that makes me be able to do 10 things in 25 seconds, let's say,
Yeah.
instead of 10 seconds. But so many of the pain points of having to do it on the screen instead of just grabbing shit have
Yeah.
been taken away. And that's huge.
You know, we live in such an exciting time because we're able to, at least for me, personally, my workflow, I get the best of both worlds because I can quote perform the mix, and I'm also able to do that crazy delay that would have taken us, you know, 40 minutes to
Oh
do
my
a
God.
box. So having the
Mhm.
ability to, the best of both worlds for me is the best time as a mixer because I can, you know, it's the possibilities are endless.
And we're so like you told the story, I think it was the first in part one about the Alicia Keys record, where like you go in, you're doing a
Yeah.
mix, and one of the very first things you do is you spend an hour and a half running the vocal through the H3000 because you got to do it. You want to get it out of the way. It's part of the process. The fact that now that would take you 10 minutes in Melodyne and it's just a playlist and like
Yeah.
whatever. Like
Or,
it's
or it's done already by the time I get
yeah,
it.
but it wasn't. But when that stuff was hard, we were still doing it. It just took
Yeah.
for fucking ever. Flying background vocals, man, flying them by bouncing them to the half-inch machine, putting a
Oh,
mark on that was 2 beats before,
yeah.
hitting play
Yeah.
and record at the same time. And like,
Oh,
I think that's a little bit early. Let's try that again. Oh, second line is different in the drums here. We got to punch that in. Like,
don't miss those
That
days.
feeling when you nailed it though, you're just like, yes.
no, but you know what?
Remember-
It was more like, thank God that we can move on. Like, it wasn't this, like, I'm a
Right.
genius thing. It was like,
Remember-
this is the way you do it, and it sucks.
Remember doing the links? We had this calculation with the links.
Oh,
then
God, yeah.
Oh my
I wrote a
God.
timecode calculator in FileMaker Pro to do offsets and stuff, and then translating that to the 3348 offsets, and when you could sample into the remote of the 3348, and like, oh man, and the 2290 would trigger the sample based on the input, and
The SBX 80. Remember that?
oh, fucking hell, man, I don't miss any of that.
I don't miss that. I definitely don't.
It's
me.
look.
That's awesome.
You want to know how bad it can be? I'm gonna hijack for a second. Someone actually made a comment last week when I said something like, "It's my show, so I'm gonna talk." So I just got one, just really quick. I was editing a mix together. I'd mixed a half inch. This was on Stadium Arcadium, so it was a Chili Peppers thing, and it was like the last record I did completely analog, from 2-inch tape mixed to half-inch tape, and I had to edit together Danny California, and they wanted to use like this version in the bridge and this version in the verses and this version in the choruses. And so I was cutting together between, I think, 3 different versions, but I had about 9 edits to do. And so you're spinning shit onto extra reels and you're taping little bits to the wall and doing all this kind of stuff. And I got a phone call. And I, like an idiot, I'm halfway through this edit and I answered the phone. And then I couldn't find the bridge of the song for like an hour and a half. And it was on a reel backwards that in the mind flow, in this creative mind flow of editing, made perfect sense to me. And it was like gone. It was missing. It was nowhere to be found. And do you miss that? No.
Yeah.
Do you like being able to, in playlist view, just copy, paste? Yeah, that sounds good.
I don't miss that at all.
Fucking hell.
It's fun to talk about, and but definitely don't miss it.
No.
At
No.
all.
We get so much more sleep now. I mean, people like don't believe us when we talk about working 20 hours a day when you're the assistant.
Mhm.
Of course you were.
Yeah.
My schedule was 10 a.m. till 5, sometimes 6 a.m. for years.
Yeah.
And nowadays, I got to tell you, they're definitely built differently today because, my guys, not my guys, but it's a different culture now. Definitely different culture. I don't want to sound like the old guy, but I will.
Yeah, but we both did a lot of blow. I didn't actually.
I remember the first time I smoked weed and I tried to mix. I was maybe 19, and that was the first time and the last time because I came back. It was a band from Chicago. It was an alternative band, and I remember coming back the next day and sounding so different and bad from what I remember.
Yeah.
Like, being in an altered state of mind may not be the best idea.
Dude, this a major producer. I remember coming in and telling me like, "Man, did this mix on mushrooms? That's a bad idea. It was a lot of fun though. It was a terrible idea."
Nowadays, a glass of wine is the most I'll ever do if I'm.
Yeah, and that's going to be near the end of the day, no question.
Oh my god, right. That's definitely the end of it. Not like when I think I was 18. One of my first sessions. I don't know if I told this story. This producer was we had been up for a week. I mean, this guy was, oh my gosh, and I realized he had so much blow on the console, right? And he was just fucking high the whole time, and he would take these 20-minute naps and then get right back up and keep mixing, and that was one of my first sessions, and I'm thinking, man, I'm gonna die. I mean, I either gotta do drugs or I gotta like espressos, but I'm gonna die. And I was like 18, so that was the first time I had seen someone do blow on the console.
Yeah, and here you are. I mean, that used to be part of fader maintenance.
That was like
because there was a studio. Studio. I think they still have a studio there. But back in the 90s, they built a studio in the parking garage of the Sunset Marquis.
Oh, yeah.
And it was a synclavier room to begin with, and then it turned into a studio. But when they finally put a console in, they actually had a mirror in the producer desk.
Wow.
And that's catering to the client. You got to check your lipstick.
The console at the school I went to, SSL, they also had a mirror in the producer section of the console that when they bought it, they didn't remove. They just left it in there.
They might have bought it from the Sunset Marquis.
Yeah.
Oh, the good old days.
Different days, man. Different days.
Yeah.
What was the disco the huge disco label in LA in the 70s?
Not Casa.
Casanova? No.
Blanca? No.
Yeah, Casablanca. I can't even remember. But anyway, famously,
the summer.
No meeting took place without a bunch of drugs. Like that's what was going to happen.
Man.
All right,
Manny, I have one very quick question left for you.
All right, is it about drugs?
What are the? No, it's about the blue horn speakers in the background. Which
yes, look at those bad boys.
Yeah,
those things sound so.
Somebody's just asking what they are. Yeah,
Meyer blue horn system. Look it up. It's amazing. That's my Atmos rig. So and then this room's stereo and which I use the TADs. And then when I switch to Atmos, I switch it to the blue horn.
Nice. So. Nice. Reminiscent of the Uris, the 813s too.
Yep. Sound much better, thankfully.
Yeah. The only thing I will say, just as a design concept that was pretty awesome, is they had the light bulbs in the 813s, and those were actually the speaker fuses. So when they were starting to light up, you knew you were going to blow something.
Yes. Wow.
Nice. One of my first sessions I ever worked on at Planet Studios in New York was with Dougie Fresh. And they were paying more for replacement drivers for the Uris than they were for studio time.
Oh my gosh. I don't miss those.
Turntable just hooked straight up into the mains, no filter, nothing, just. But when you have the first platinum 12-inch ever with the show and la-di-da, like, why the fuck not?
Why not, right? That I miss, being, not the technical things of it, but just the, it was a lot of excess back then. A lot of excess.
Yeah.
Record plant days. I mean, Hit Factory days in New York, and everything was just a lot of
Yeah, back when the industry was printing money.
Yep. So.
Printing money. Well, on that note, I think we've reached the end.
Go print some money to pay for this freaking thing.
Yeah. No shit. Well, we're all gonna get rich off this this webcast, so don't worry about it.
This one, it's probably the three people that are asking the same questions. Like, who wants to hear Manny talk?
And that's all the question. It was actually me. I was putting the questions the whole time.
No, man. The people.
It was me texting questions like, "Oh, what would I want to ask myself so that it looks like people are listening?"
No, man. The people want to hear from Manny. People do.
Absolutely.
So it's always a pleasure, man. This is amazing. I love talking and shooting the shit with you. And
excellent, man. It's been great. It's great to catch up. It's a little added bonus for me.
Oh man, and enjoy the holidays. And I wish I was going up north, but next time I'm in that part of the world, I got to come see you, and vice versa. When you're out here, you got to come see me.
Yeah. It's long overdue. I was actually starting to think about getting a trip together to see my dad and then get over to LA, but Omicron, baby.
Yeah. Oh man. Let's see what happens. I think I just read that they don't think it's as contagious or as bad as they once thought.
Right. It's not as deadly, but it's like
really?
Well, and all right. So here's just a little little pandemic thing that I overheard an interview with a virologist over here, which was interesting to me, which I'd kind of forgotten about. First of all, it was a year ago last week that the UK authorized the first vaccine for use. Like, it feels like a decade ago.
Wow.
And it's 53 weeks ago that Pfizer was okayed for use in the UK. And I think the US was actually later than the UK. The UK was one of the first. Later. So that's the first thing, how much. But anyway, what she was saying, and this has nothing to do with anything we've talked about, I just found it interesting. We got the Delta variant, which has been the thing that's been just destroying us for the last 5 months. But what I'd forgotten about, and what she was talking about, was that before Delta, obviously because you're using the Greek alphabet, there were the Alpha and the Beta variants, which were both deadly as fuck. Like, they didn't care about vaccines, and the hospitalization and death rates were very, very high. But because the Delta variant, which wasn't nearly as deadly, was better at spreading, it wiped out the Alpha and the Beta. So, like, the best news in the world would be if it turns out that Omicron is 10 times more transmissible than Delta, which it seems like it might be, but isn't as deadly, it will wipe out the Delta variant eventually.
So crazy.
So that's what we got to hope for, is like crazy transmissible ones that don't mess you up as much. But
well, hopefully, like hurricanes, right? They name them, they start with the alphabet, like you said. Hopefully we're at O. Hopefully we'll get to that Z quicker.
Dude, they're just going to pick another alphabet.
Yeah.
Yeah. But get your jabs, wear a mask, and go to Verse, right?
Yeah, man. Yep, exactly. Let's do it.
All right.
Well,
awesome.
Again, thank you guys, Mark.
All right, thanks, Manny. So now we're going to wave and I'll
Good to see you,
mute and we'll do the whole usual thing of being awkward. So, see ya.